you're listening to this, just know that I believe in you. I promise you. It just takes time and a little bit of effort. But you just have to have a little bit of faith and a little bit of hope. You can do it.
Congratulations and welcome to the Write Your Book course, where over the next few modules, you're not only going to learn how to take that idea and turn it into a full-fledged book, but also how to take that knowledge and put it into action. Now, as you may have seen, the course is divided into 8 separate modules. Feel free to scan over them ahead of time, but just so you know, the course is meant to be taken sequentially, in order, module by module. So make sure you go ahead and finish one before moving on to the next one. You, like so many of the students before you, are going to do great. You now have everything you need to turn that book goal into reality that you'll be holding in your hand before you know it. Now, if you have any questions along the way, make sure you jump into our private Facebook group that I built just for you and other Write Your Book students so that you can answer each other's questions and get answers directly from me. So congratulations once again, and let's jump right in. Now, the difference between good books and great books is clarity of purpose. Good books try to do too much, and they often lose or confuse readers along the way. Great books succeed because they try to do one thing really well. They answer one question. They solve one problem. They help the reader achieve one goal. So if you want to write a great book, your first job is to figure out what's that one thing you want your book to do. To help drive this home, I did some research over the best-selling nonfiction books over the last 10 or 15 years. And what I found is that this theory held true. Books like Quiet by Susan Cain try to answer one single question: why are introverts actually at an advantage in today's world? Or the book like Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. His book tried to convey one idea, that there is a tipping point you can use to help spread your idea. Now, these are just a few examples from a very long list of bestsellers, but the idea holds true. The books that succeed are the books that have a single clear purpose. There are a number of other methods and programs out there that try to teach you how to write a book by starting with chapters or details or other sorts of minutia. Now, what I've found is that most of those programs lead to a very confusing and complicated book when you're all done. So what I encourage my students and myself to do is always start with one clear big idea, because that big idea is going to lead you to craft a clear destination in mind for your reader. And it's also going to provide a filter as you go through the entire project. I want to offer you 4 questions that help me craft my initial idea. Each of these represent a different kind of book, so don't feel like your idea has to fit through all of them. Rather, go through them and see which one resonates most with you. So first, we have transformation. What transformation am I trying to help my reader make? Myth. What myth am I trying to break with my book? Habit or action? What habit or action am I helping my reader either build or break in their life? And finally, journey. What journey am I hoping to take my reader on? Go ahead and take a few minutes to figure out which of these 4 resonates most with the idea and the book you're trying to create. If you'd like, you can go ahead and answer all 4 of them actually to see which one feels best when you actually have it written out. But the goal is to have one clear goal in mind and to answer it with one single sentence. And that will be the core of your big idea. In the previous video, we covered 4 different questions that were meant to help you focus the kind of book you wanted to write and start to develop an idea of how it was going to help your reader. On this short video, I want to cover a 5th question, an additional question that's going to help us dive a little deeper into the driving force of your book. And that question is, and why? So this question is really about you. Why are you the one to write this book? Why do you want to write this book? So if we kind of pair up that why question with the categories we talked about before, we can start to dive a little deeper into the book that we want to write. So for example, why is that transformation worth pursuing? Why is this a myth worth breaking? Why is this an action your reader should adopt? Or why is this a journey they should go on? And the way we answer those questions in a real way is going back to you and your story. So the 4 questions help us figure out the what and the how of the book. And the why is that undercurrent. Bringing in the element of you and your own why is what's going to make your book stand apart, and it's going to tie that human element to the idea you're trying to bring across through your book. One of my favorite phrases is that it's easy to write a book when you have something to say. And that has kind of been the idea behind this whole first module. Because when your idea has clarity, your book will have clarity. And when your book has clarity, your reader is going to have direction. And when your reader has a clear direction to follow because of your book, that book will become a success. Now the final piece is to go ahead and write down your big idea along with the why in the downloadable worksheet that came with this module. In the next module, we're going to learn how to take this big idea that you've been working hard on and tease it out into a full outline that's going to make writing your book a breeze. I want to start off this module with a quote by Zig Ziglar. Now he says that lack of direction, not lack of time, is actually the problem. I know that writing a book can seem overwhelming at first. Even after writing a number of books myself, I still feel that feeling every time I sit down with a new project. But writing a book is just like anything else big we try to do in life, like moving houses or driving across the country. When we can break it down, when we can get a guide or a map to help us, then the whole project will seem a lot easier and a lot less stressful. And so that is my goal with this module. I want to show us how to create an outline that is going to take our mind off the entire big project of writing a book and help us focus on just the very next step. And that is how we're going to make your book project a success. In Module 2, a lot of our focus was on the question of what. What did we want our big idea to be, and what do we want our reader to get out of it? As we move into the outlining phase, our question is how. How can we shape our book? How can we communicate the idea to make it as effective as possible? Now, if you're an avid reader, you've probably seen the dozens of different types of nonfiction books that are out there. And while each genre has its own specific nuances, they all pretty much follow the same format when it comes to constructing a map or an outline. And that is to come up with the big idea sections. Now, the way we construct these sections is to systematically pull apart the big idea so that together they help accomplish that one big idea goal. In the downloadable worksheet below this video, I have an exercise where you can mind map out the sections that will help you accomplish your big idea. And to give you an idea of what the process might look like, I wanted to walk you through an example with a make-believe book that I came up with. So here, the big idea could be morning routine for writers. Now this would be the big idea. Maybe the sentence I could use is that I believe every writer should have a morning routine because it helped me double my output in 30 days. Something clear and advantageous for the reader like that. So if that was a big idea, these are kind of the sections I would break it down into. The first section could be support for a morning routine. What does the science say behind constructing a morning routine, whether you're a writer or not? What advantages does it give you? How does it help your health and your energy and so on? Next, I could do a section about the routine. What does the actual routine consist of? What parts or habits help me make my morning a success every single day? Third, I could add a section about reader exercises. What could the reader do to start constructing their own morning routine? What could they adopt from my own, or how could they pull in pieces that are more unique to them? Finally, I could end the book with an additional resources section that talked about how they can learn more about morning routines or more how to be a productive writer. And all together, even though these sections might seem different, they all feed into the one big idea. Now, my advice for you when constructing your sections is to aim to have between 2 and 5. I found that that's kind of the golden range for having a book that's both focused and that keeps the reader progressing through it quickly. When you start to add too many sections, like 10, 12, or 15, then that's when your book can start to seem unfocused or a little too broad. And when you have less than that, that's when it can seem like your book just didn't really accomplish what it set out to do. So again, go ahead and use the downloadable worksheet below to mind map out your first few sections. They don't have to be perfect to start with. We just want to start getting your ideas down on paper so that as we continue the process, you'll have everything you need to construct the exact book that you want to write. Congratulations, you are well on your way to finishing your book. Now, going forward, we're going to start focusing and getting our hands dirty with the details. And this is where you can really start to let your creativity and expertise shine. In this video specifically, we're going to be talking about how to outline chapters. And this method follows very closely to what we did before when we were outlining sections. So we took the big idea and broke that down into 2 to 5 big sections to help communicate that idea. Now, in the same way, when we're breaking down sections into chapters, we want to keep in mind that each chapter is going to help us understand, believe, or complete that big idea. There's an analogy I like to use when writing a book. And so if you think about a book as an archer, I just drew the bow because I couldn't draw the archer. So if you think of the book as the archer, then the sections would be the quiver. And those are the things that hold the arrows. And the chapters themselves would be the individual arrows. So each arrow is very sharp, very targeted, and very purposeful. And in the same way, we want our chapters to feel that way, that each one has a clear purpose and a clear destination in mind for our reader to read through and grow from. All right, so we have a new board up here, and I wanted to bring back the example we had from the previous video where I was talking about writing a book on morning routines for writers. Now I wrote up 3 of the 4 sections we had before, and I just want to kind of walk you through how I would think about constructing chapters for each one of these sections. So the first section we have over here is support. So support for morning routines for writers. So in my mind, one thing I would begin with was kind of my own personal story. So I'll just abbreviate it. So my personal story. How did I get introduced to morning routines, and specifically, how did I find ones about writers? Next, I'd probably do, I'm going to abbreviate all these. I talk about other famous authors and their morning routines. So this kind of just adds support that it's not something just I do, but that a lot of writers historically have done this practice to help them with their overall career. After that, I'd probably bring in some science, just write an S for science, some like scientific studies and support that help just kind of bring this whole idea home that it's something I've benefited from, it's something other people have benefited from, and there's science to back up the whole idea that morning routines are a good thing for writers. So we're in the 2 to 5 range. Each one is pretty targeted and the section is pretty well supported. Then we can move on to the next one, the content. So I'd probably start off with a little introduction. So let's say my morning routine consisted of 4 different pieces, right? Like I'd get up, drink water, so on and so forth. So I'd have 4 little actions that made up my morning routine. My first chapter would be an introduction to what those 4 things actually were. And then each chapter would be about one of those things. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And in each chapter, I'd try to answer probably the 3 questions. So like, what is it? Why do I do it? Or why is that action important as part of your morning routine? And then how does it happen, or how can you adopt it too? So, the content of the morning routine, I explained what the contents are, and then I went into detail about each of those 4 specific contents. And then moving on to the next section, so we talked about exercises before, and so this one is very reader focused or reader centric. So because it's so focused on the reader, I'd probably begin with some encouragement for the reader to say, hey, this is how you should expect to enter the morning routine. Probably with that, I'd add on a formula for them to follow. So, I have the 4 pieces here. I'd probably give them like a nice outline or just pattern to kind of follow when they're constructing their own morning routine. Next, I'd kind of talk about the different challenges they might face or how to troubleshoot if they're having trouble adopting their own morning routine. And then finally, I'd probably give them like a 30-day challenge as part of that chapter. So, hey, here's encouragement to adopt a morning routine. Here's how to do it with the formula. Here's some ways to troubleshoot if it's not working for you right off the bat. And now here's how to really bring it all home and adopt it in the next 30 days. So as you can see, each chapter can kind of be summarized in a single sentence, and they each clearly support the section they're a part of. So like building blocks, you can see that every single chapter feeds up to the section, which feeds up into the one big idea. So I want to encourage you to go ahead on the worksheet below, go ahead and start working through your ideas for different chapters and just start outlining as you go. One thing I always encourage people is to remember that an outline is not written in stone. When I work through my own projects, my own outlines, they change at least half a dozen times before, during, and after the project. And so, if you come up with something great and then you get to chapter 4, chapter 5, and you're like, oh, I think I needed to add this, or this piece doesn't make sense anymore. That's okay. You're in charge of this entire book process. The more work we do up front, the easier the whole book process is going to be, but that doesn't mean you have to follow it to the T once it's finished. Remember, you have complete creative control over this whole process. Any change you might want is going to be easy to make, and at the end of the day, you're going to have a book you're very confident about and that is very clear to your reader. Nearly every type of nonfiction book that you might want to write is going to require some level of research. Now, I know research can be an intimidating word, so I want to break it down for you and show you how easy it can really be. Now, when we think about research, what we're talking about is 2 main phases: the gathering information phase and the organizing that information phase. Together, those are going to help you take your reader to somewhere they've never been and to learn something they didn't know before. Next, I want to talk about the two main benefits of doing research ahead of time before you begin writing your book. First of all, it's going to help with authority. When you incorporate research into your book, it's not only going to show that you know what you're talking about, but that you've worked with other people, worked with other sources that also know what they're talking about. And overall, it's going to help your reader trust what you have to say in your book. The second benefit of doing research ahead of time is that it adds momentum to the overall book. So if you've ever read something that seems to just talk in circles or drag on too long, it's most likely because they didn't do the work ahead of time, didn't do the research needed to make sure that their book had momentum, that it was clearly progressing from one chapter, from one section to another. Of course, you can do the research phase before you have a big idea, but I prefer to do it afterward. Once you've already started to construct your outline with sections and chapters, then when you go to do the research, you're going to have a much better idea of what you need to find and what's going to help build towards that main point. Finally, I wanted to make a point about the type of research you should be engaging in. Now, below this video, I have a list of the different types of resources you could look for when adding research to your nonfiction book. For me, I always try to think about things that I'm comfortable with and that I enjoy reading. So, for example, I tend to use academic books and articles in nearly every book that I write because with my background in higher education, that's something I'm really comfortable with. What I don't tend to use are things like in-person interviews. It's just not a format I've had a lot of experience with, so it's not something that really shows up in my writing. All right, now it's time to go ahead and use that worksheet or your own piece of paper to jot down a few sources that might help you in the research phase for your book. Maybe books that you've read or videos and lectures you've seen recently. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to capture and organize that research that you find so that it can make your writing phase very efficient. In my own writing journey, I've come across two main sources of the feeling of overwhelm. Problem one is not knowing what to say at all, and problem two is having too much to say and not knowing how to organize it. So up to this point, we've pretty much taken care of problem one by coming up with a big idea, beginning our outline, and just really building some structure around what we want to say. Now in this video, we're going to tackle problem number two so that we can learn how to organize what we want to say in such a way that's going to make writing our book very easy. The system I want to show you today is called the note card method. Now, I learned this first from one of my professors in college, and then again from one of my favorite writers, Ryan Holiday. They each use different versions of what I'm going to show you, and again, I use a different version than what they do. So feel free to customize this however you need to really make it work for you. All you need are some note cards and a shoebox. This one here is an example. It's going to be a little more empty than they usually are. But I just wanted to give you like a visual representation of what I'm talking about. Let me show you here. So to begin with, I always tape on the big idea on top. So let's say we were talking about the morning routine for writers example. That whole title would go on here. So morning routine for writers. Then on the inside, what I would usually do is have some colored note cards. And right now I'm out of the colored ones, so I used a sticky note instead. And each different color would represent a different section. So let's say this is section A. Let's say this was the routine that we're talking about in the book. Now behind each section note card, I would have individual chapter note cards. And so it's real simple, write chapter or abbreviated right there, and then the name or the topic of that chapter that you're writing. Then behind each chapter note card, this is where the actual notes and product of my research would go. So I just wrote a couple examples out for you. Let's say that I was reading a book and there was a quote in it that related to the chapter on drinking water, right? So I would write the source, so the book title, the quote itself, and where I found it, the page number, so on. Another example would be a question I had when I was thinking about this. So let's say I asked about coffee. Well, when someone's forming a morning routine, it'd be a good idea like, why should we drink water versus other drinks? So that's a question I might want to answer in that chapter. Next, just like a simple story idea, John and his water bottle. Maybe John used his water bottle as a way to start his morning habit or make it more effective. And so anytime I have an idea or I come across a resource, I'm putting it in a little pile. I'm putting that pile behind the chapter one and then just paper clipping them together. So in the box itself, what you're going to have are 2 to 5 different section titles, depending on how big your book is. And then behind each section, you're going to have 2 to 5 of these chapters. And behind each chapter, you're going to have a number of individual note cards. So when you have, 20 to 30 chapters in here, each with dozens of notes for each chapter, you can see how this would fill up very quickly. Now, I get asked a lot about how much information should you have for each chapter. My advice would be to aim for somewhere between 10 and 12 different ideas or sources behind each. That will help you know how much you really have to say about that individual chapter and topic. If you're having a hard time coming up with 3 or 4 sources or ideas, then maybe that shouldn't be an entire chapter. Now, the purpose of this exercise is so that anytime you come across an idea, question, or quote, that doesn't have to get lost in the other sphere. It can go somewhere specific. Whether or not it stays in that chapter or section that you wrote down or that you put it in initially, you can move it around however you need, but that way you have it captured somewhere where you know you're going to go back and look. One more version of this exercise would be to use a notebook. Let's say you take one spiral bound notebook and that will be your project notebook, and then you divide it equally into different sections, maybe every 10 or 20 pages, and then each page itself would be a chapter. You write it right at the top. Then anytime you come across the similar resources like story, quotes, ideas, questions, you jot it down on that page related to that chapter. And then all you have to do is carry on one notebook and all of your research is going to be captured in that one source. Okay, I hope this exercise was helpful for you. This whole thing is to support you and how you work and how you write. So make sure you customize it to really support the book and the kind of writing that you want to do. Congratulations on completing Module 3. So in this section, we focused on creating a map that is going to help you construct a book that keeps your reader engaged from page 1 all the way to the last sentence. By now, you should have a basic outline for the general structure of your book, and you should also have a pretty good idea of how you want to catalog and capture the ideas, stories, and research you come across. Now, before moving on to the next module, I want to recommend you do 2 steps. So the first one is to do a brain dump. Go ahead and fill in a bunch of note cards with any ideas, stories, or quotes you already know. That way you can get them out of your head and into your system before you start the research phase. Second, I want you to go ahead and set a deadline for your gather or research phase. My recommendation is 1 to 2 weeks max. You just want to get a good idea of what's going to support your writing and then jump into that writing phase. Now, I know you'll have to look up things along the way and after you do your writing, but we're going to talk about how to address that later on in a different module. Now, you can complete Module 4 while you are doing your research phase, but I recommend getting both of those done before moving on to Module 5, because that's where we're going to do the bulk of the writing. Alright, I hope you're starting to see your book take shape. Remember, the more work you do up front, the better your end product is going to be, and the faster you're going to get there. If I have learned anything over the last decade of being a writer, it's that writing never just happens. You have to be intentional if you want to write and finish a book. So in this module, we're going to get specific about the keys you need to understand in order to finish your quality book. First, we're going to dive into the 3 keys that are going to help you answer what, when, where, and how much you need to be writing every single day. Next, we're going to dive into individual chapters, and I'm going to show you my personal strategy for cranking out at least 1 chapter a day, so that you can finish your book in as little as 2 weeks. Finally, I'm going to give you the exact tools I use to track and reach my goals so that you can start miles ahead of the average author. Alright, let's get started. Whenever I begin a new writing project, I always try to make sure I have these 3 pieces in place: the time, place, and goal. Now, the reason for this is that we want to create a writing habit that's going to make finishing our book a breeze. To help us do that, I pulled out some information from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. Now, in that book, he breaks down a habit into 4 distinct parts: the cue, craving, routine, and reward. So we're going to focus on those first 2 parts with this lesson. The cue is the outer device that tells us it's time to begin a habit. And the craving is that inner device that tells us, all right, let's get the habit started. Now, for this lesson, we're going to learn how to shape the time and place and goals so that we can create cues and cravings that get our writing started as soon as we want to. So the first element is time, and we can break this down into 2 main questions. When am I going to write? And how long am I going to write for? Personally, I like to get my writing done in the morning before I start the rest of the day. I find that that time has the least amount of distractions and I can get a lot done in a very short amount of time. When I was working my full-time job, I focused on doing writing sprints. So short 15 to 20 minute writing sprints broken up by 3 to 5 minute breaks. And I would string these together, maybe 3 to 4 at a time, over about an hour to 2 hour period. And that's how I would hit my goal every single day. Now, I know for many of you, you might not be able to write every single day. But the priority here is developing a rhythm or routine so that you're making consistent progress every single week towards your book. When you write and how long you write for doesn't matter so much so long as you are making that progress. But my advice is that you do pick a consistent time and a consistent length of time so that you're building that skill and habit of writing. Now the second element we're going to talk about is place. Now there are literally dozens of books that talk about the importance of environment and environment design for creative work. Rather than get lost in all those details though, my advice to give you a quick win is to pick one set location to do your writing in, whether that's a room in your house, a seat on your couch, or a local library. You want to pick somewhere that's easy to get to and that has the least amount of distractions possible. Now the idea here is that a set location is going to reinforce the habit. So for example, when you walk into a gym, your brain registers the kind of activities that you do there and begins to prepare your body accordingly. And in the same way, that's why it's not advised that you do work in your bedroom or keep a TV there, because that can mess up your sleep cycle because your brain doesn't know which activity it's really time for. When you pick a particular place to write, that means every time you go there, your brain is preparing you to enter writing mode. And you'd be surprised how well this actually works. Now the final piece has to do with creating a clear writing goal. And by that, we mean word count. So in the next video, we're going to talk about exactly how long your book needs to be and why. In this video, we're going to answer one of the questions that I get asked all the time. How long should your book be? And to answer this, we're going to break it down in a couple of different ways. First, since this course deals primarily with nonfiction, my answers are going to fit that genre. And since there's a bunch of different types of nonfiction books, there's going to be some variety. Second, my answers are just a guideline or a gauge to see if you're heading in the right direction. Don't feel like you have to use them as kind of a limit to what you want to create. And third, the numbers I'm going to give you are from my own experience writing more than a dozen books. So while you might find different numbers online, these are the ones I'm very comfortable teaching because this is what I've actually written. Okay, on the board here, you can see 3 different levels. So the first one is 20 to 30,000 words. Now these are very short, concise books. A number of my shorter works fit into that. These are like lasers, have one clear idea, and they give the reader exactly what they're looking for. The second range here is 30 to 50,000 words. This is what you would typically think of when you hold, a 200-page nonfiction book. This range allows you to include some narrative and also some research to really build out your idea. The final range here is 60,000 to 100,000. Now these are pretty huge nonfiction books. If you think about Robert Greene, a number of his books are this size, and that's because they usually include a large amount of narrative. So for every big idea they're trying to get across, they're sharing dozens and dozens of stories or dozens of pieces of research for every single thing. Now, while this size can be very helpful in certain genres, this is definitely not my recommendation for what people should begin with. So if we take a minute to talk about the lower and upper range of this, so if you write something below 20,000 words, it's going to be a little bit difficult to market because of how small it is. That's why my minimum would be right around 20,000 words. And if you're writing well above 100,000 words, my advice would be to figure out if you can turn that into a series, because over the long term, that's going to be a much more profitable exercise. To do that, let's kind of walk through an example here. So let's say your outline produced 12 chapter ideas. Right? So you had one big idea, you broke it down into say 3 sections, and then each section had 4 chapters. So total, that would give us 12 chapters. Now my advice for new authors is always to aim for that middle range. So the 30 to 50K range. Okay, so if that's the number we're trying to hit, we can just do some easy division and see that if we did 3 to 4,000 words for each chapter, that would get us a total of 36 to 48,000 words for our book. And that would fit perfectly into this range. So this number right here would be the overall size of the book we want to hit. And to break that down, we have this as the size of our chapters, 3 to 4,000 words each chapter. Now, in order to break this number down into a daily word count goal, we just have to think about the pace that we want to keep. So my recommendation would be to aim for about 2 chapters a week. Let's say our goal is 6,000 words every week, which would equal about 2 chapters, all right? So if we are writing Monday through Saturday, that equals 1,000 words every day. So if we are writing about 1,000 words a day, that's going to get us about 2 chapters a week. And that will get us to our completed book in about 4 to 6 weeks or about 1 full month. So I hope this example was helpful. I just want to show you how writing a book doesn't have to be overwhelming if you break it down into how big your book is going to be, how big the chapters are going to be, and then how much you want to write every single day. If you can kind of break it apart like that, then the overall goal is going to seem a lot more doable. I want to begin this lesson with a short quote. So up here it says, "Out of limitations comes creativity." Now in this lesson, we're going to be talking about constructing a chapter. And while this is completely optional, I do encourage it if you find yourself facing writer's block. Usually that's a symptom of having too many options. And so by inputting limitations, it's actually going to increase your productivity and your ability to be creative and finish the project. During all of the previous modules, this is actually what I've been helping you do. Draw the right kind of boundaries around your project so that you can actually finish your book and enjoy the process. So when I talk about constructing a chapter, I don't mean I want you to have a cookie cutter shape to every single one. Rather, I want you to have a similar route or similar journey in mind for your reader so that they can know what to expect every time they turn the page. For example, in the book The Customer Rules by Lee Cockrell, and this is one of the best-selling books on customer service, he follows these 4 points in pretty much every single chapter. He begins with a quote or personal story to kind of highlight the idea he wants to get across. Next, he talks about application in a high level. So how does this apply to business, mostly in theory and big ideas? Next, he moves down to how does it apply in practice? On the ground level, what does this idea actually look like? And finally, he closes each chapter with a clear takeaway or an actionable suggestion so that you can take that idea and start using it in your business that same day. Now, every single one of his chapters actually uses that 4-point structure. Some of the chapters are long, some of them are short, but to the trained eye, you can see that there's a process to how he writes and communicates in every single one. And so that's the process that you can use to make your writing time very effective and move through the chapters very quickly. In the notes below this video, I went ahead and wrote down my structure that I used for one of the books I wrote in 2018. There you're going to find a nice list, about 8 points of what I did every time I was writing one of my chapters for that book. Now, while every chapter I wrote used a version of that outline, some chapters left pieces out while others added some in. The whole point is that you have that structure in place as a guide, not as a hard stop to what you want to create. Plus, this whole process makes my writing time very efficient because every time I sit down, I have a pretty good idea of where I want to go because of the structure. And then I have an idea of how long it's going to take me to get there because of the word count we talked about before. Now, it's going to take you a few chapters to really get a good idea of what you want your chapters to look like. And to help you with this, I included an exercise in the downloadable worksheet for this module. So go ahead, experiment a little bit, see what structures might work with the book you're trying to write, and have fun doing it. Stephen King says that the scariest moment is always just before you start. Now, you have done a tremendous amount of work up to this point, and because of that, you have just made the book writing process exponentially easier. Will it still take work? Absolutely. Writing is a journey, but now you have extra support already in place. A map in the outline that you created, tools to help you track and maintain progress, and a community of other writers and leaders who are there to encourage you along the way. In this module, I'm going to share some of my best tips for overcoming challenges, as well as simple things you can do to guarantee that your finished book is going to stand out from the crowd. All right, let's jump right in. I want to start off this lesson with a story. So back in the 1950s, Ford wanted to revolutionize the car industry again. And so they poured in all this research and all these resources into creating their dream car, and they named it the Ford Edsel, named after Henry Ford's own son. Now, chances are that you've never heard of this car, let alone driven one, and that's because their crowning achievement ended up being a complete flop, all because they made one fatal mistake. Now, their mistake was that they intentionally tried to market it to everyone. They wanted to make it the car for every person, and by doing that, they made it a car that appealed to nobody. Now, the same thing goes for your writing. Kurt Vonnegut, one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, wrote that you should write to please one person, because if you open a window and try to make love to the world, your story is going to get pneumonia. I love that quote, and it leads me into what I call my $1 million writing advice, which is super simple, but this is the secret sauce to writing a book that people are really going to engage with and love. And that is to write to just one person. For my own projects, I even go so far as to print out a picture of my ideal reader. So that way, whenever I sit down to write, I am picturing as though I'm writing directly to that person. You know, what words would connect with them? What stories or analogies would they resonate with? What words wouldn't they understand or would confuse them from the main point I'm trying to drive home? Having a clear person and not just this audience figure in your mind is going to help you write a much more compelling book. So I want you to think about this for a minute. Have you ever read something like a book or an article and felt like, man, it felt like that was written just to me, right to my situation, right to my story? That's what we want to give our readers, and that's what's going to set your book apart. And in order to do that, we want to move from this audience mentality to a single, clear, identifiable reader. So I want you to take a few minutes and think about who that might be. Someone in your life, someone in your network. Who comes to mind when you say this would be the perfect person to read a book like mine, to grow, to gain something out of what I want to create? And in the worksheet that accompanies this module, I have a few questions and exercises to really help you pull that out if you're having trouble figuring out who your ideal reader might be, because this is such a valuable exercise and it's really going to help your work stand apart. Writing a first draft can be incredibly fun, but also incredibly frustrating. So in this video, I want to give you some of my best tips for getting through it as quickly and pain-free as possible. Tip number one is to always write more. Now, I'm a firm believer that great writing is concise writing, but that's not the goal of the first draft. The goal of the first draft is to get all of your ideas, all of your stories, all of your words down on the page. And then later on, that's when we can edit and perfect it into something beautiful. The analogy I always like to think of when writing is actually sculpting. So if you start with a big block of marble, you can experiment, you can make mistakes, and your final product can still become this beautiful thing. But if you start off with this very little skinny block of marble, well, then you have to be a lot more careful and you might break it or have to start all over. So the idea with the first draft is that you want to create for yourself a big block of marble that you can sculpt and shape in the editing phase to make it the perfect book for you. Finally, it might be a little counterintuitive, but writing more actually allows you to write faster because you're not so concerned with making every sentence perfect. You just want to get those words out on the page, and then later on, that's when you can really shape it into what you want it to be. My second piece of advice is don't edit along the way. So editing is a completely different part of the process, and you actually want to kind of train your brain to ignore problems during the first draft phase. This is because our goal in writing is to enter the flow state, and the flow state is when you are completely immersed and all of your focus is on the main task at hand. Now, that can be hard to do, and when you're training your brain to do hard things, it's going to want to fight back. It's going to want to look for distractions or try to help you do little edits along the way. But that's actually counterproductive, and what we want to do is stay in that state of flow because that's where our best writing is going to come from. So really resist the urge to do any edits during that first draft phase and just get through it as quickly and pain-free as you can. Now, my third piece of advice is kind of related to the second, and it says don't rewrite. So the whole idea is that you don't want to go back and do any rewriting during your main writing phase time. I know for me personally, there are days where I will sit down and I'm going to work hard for an hour or two, and I'm going to finish that chunk or that chapter, and I'm going to think it's absolute garbage. The truth is that it might be, but it's much, much more likely that it's not. And it's just that I'm too close to see what that chapter actually is and what it might actually need to become great instead of just average. So that is actually why I never rewrite any part of a book until I'm completely done with the entire project. That allows me to have the full context, the full scope of what this book is, of what it sounds like, and of how that specific chapter or chunk fits into the grand project. Then with all of that information, I can start to look at that piece of writing for what it really is and for what it really needs. So again, do yourself a favor and don't do any rewriting until your entire project, until your entire book is finished with that first draft. Now, my last and fourth piece of advice is to research later. So we talked about doing the gather or research phase before you start writing, and now my advice is once you're in that first draft phase, don't do any more research until you're completely done with that. This is going to help keep you in a state of flow so that you can really make the most of your dedicated writing times. I know for me personally, there are moments when I'm writing when I can't remember a name or location or the details of a story. Instead of breaking my writing time to go look those things up, what I do instead is just enter parentheses and bold for anything I can't remember. So let's say I'm citing an article about research and it's by some doctor and I can't remember his or her name. So what I would do instead is just write doctor, parentheses, look up name later, and then continue on with my writing. Or you can use the same thing for a location or the details of a story. That way you have something to go back to during your editing or perfecting phase, but you're not stopping your writing time to go find that answer. All right, so those are just a few of my tips. As you can see, a lot of them were focused on helping you get to and stay in that flow state so you can make the most of your writing time, and this is going to help you fly through your first draft. Parkinson's law says that work expands to fill the time available for its completion, and I think that's 100% true for writing. You might have heard of great authors taking years or even decades to finish their book. And on the other end of the spectrum, you might have heard of stories like Rocky being written in 3 days, or The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which was written in only 2 days. Now, our goal for your book is to find something in the middle of that, to pick a due date that's going to push you to write consistently, but that's not going to drive you crazy in the process. If you completed the activity from the previous module, you should have a daily word count goal in mind, and that can help you set an initial due date for your writing project. Most projects should be completed in that 30 to 60 day window, if not shorter, because when they start to stretch beyond that, it can be really difficult to actually finish them. It's important to remember that setting a due date you might fail at is perfectly okay. I usually set my due date about a week or two earlier than I think I might need, because it gives me a little extra push to get that writing done. And I actually hit that earlier date about 80% of the time. So I want you to take a minute and figure out, set a due date that's going to work for you, that's going to push you to actually finish this project and keep you accountable. Congratulations, if you're watching this video, that means you've already completed or are nearly complete with your first draft. I want to commend you because that is a huge accomplishment. According to nationwide polls, over 81% of people say they want to write a book someday, and less than 0.04 of them ever actually do. That comes out to only 1 in 2,500 people ever actually write the book that they want to write. So you are in a small minority and you have done something truly magnificent. I want to encourage you because the bulk of the work is complete. The rest of this module is going to be focusing on how to refine and perfect the manuscript you already have. In order to do that, we're going to be talking about steps like editing, asking for feedback, writing a proper introduction and conclusion, and a few other related tasks like that. So I want to congratulate you one more time, and now let's go ahead and take your draft and turn it into something truly amazing. Editing can be a hot topic because there are a lot of right ways and wrong ways to do it. And what I found is that a lot of newer authors are kind of overwhelmed by the idea of having to fix something they just spend all this time and energy creating. So my goal with this video lesson is to give you a simple system to follow that's going to dramatically improve the quality of your book. So step 1 is to go ahead and rest the book. Now what I mean by that is to give yourself a week where you don't work on anything related to the book project. Writing a book, even if it's a dry academic text, is an emotional project because you're very connected to what you're creating. So by resting it, you're kind of creating some distance in between you and the work, so that when you re-enter it and start your editing and perfecting phase, you can do it with a more professional eye. Now my second tip is to copy and paste your work into the tool Grammarly. Grammarly is a web-based tool that's going to help you catch a lot of those minor, smaller grammar mistakes you've made along the way in your work. There's also a paid version that'll go a little deeper and help you with the overall style and tone of your work. Whichever one you use, I do recommend using a tool like Grammarly or Grammarly itself because it's going to save you a lot of time in that initial editing phase. My third step is to go ahead and print out the work and then go through it with a colored pen like red, green, or purple. Those are my favorite colors to work with. This step is what people typically think of when they think about editing a work. And what you want to look for with your colored pens are missing sentences or words, grammar issues, paragraphs you might want to move around, or stories or ideas you might want to add in or take out of your work. Now this step is pretty flexible. Basically what you want to be looking for are sections in your book that make your reader stop, confused, or lost. Now the idea here is that if it makes you stop or pause while you're reading or editing your book, then it's definitely going to interrupt your reader and give them a lesser experience. So you want to go ahead and fix those, plug in those holes, and it's going to make your finished product much better. Then the next step is print out another copy of your work so that you can read it aloud. Now this step is actually, again, one of my secret weapons for taking a good book and making it great. By reading it aloud, you're bringing your ears into the editing process, and since they have kind of a different sensitivity to language, you're going to be adding a whole nother layer quality to your book. So similar to step 3, what you would do is go ahead and read it aloud, keep a colored pen nearby, and every time you hear something that doesn't sound quite right, underline it or circle it so you can fix that later. Now the 5th and final step is to get some feedback from another human reader. The whole idea is just to get another set of human eyes on your work so they can read through. In the next lesson, I'll be talking about what kind of editors there are and whether or not you should use one. For the feedback step, what I have in mind is usually just someone in your personal circle, could be a spouse, a best friend, someone you know, or someone who is excited about the book that you're writing. And the goal here for their feedback is not necessarily to find more grammatical issues, or so forth. What you want them to look for is whether or not your book delivers on your one big idea, that one promise you're making to the reader. Now, it would be ideal if your feedback came from someone who is in your target audience, but it definitely doesn't have to. We just want to go ahead and get someone else's take on the book that we've produced. So there you have it. Those are my 5 steps that are going to help you dramatically improve the quality of your book. I guarantee if you really take your time and work through these, your finished product is going to be amazing. A great editor is worth their weight in gold, but finding such an editor can be just as challenging as digging for buried treasure. Over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to work with about half a dozen editors across 20 plus different projects, and I've had mixed results, so I want to be really clear about a few things up front. Number 1 is that you can always get your book professionally edited after you've published it. Now, I know some people would have my head for saying this, but honestly, this is one of the strategies I used when I was first starting out. I would get my book out there, and then the money you would make would eventually pay for me to get it professionally edited. That actually leads us into the second point, where if you have a limited budget, there's actually more important things you should be spending your money on, such as a great cover or formatting. Readers can be pretty forgiving if you have a few grammatical mistakes throughout your book, but if you don't have a great cover, they're never even going to buy your book in the first place. And if your formatting stinks, they're not going to get past the first page. So that's why I would spend my limited budget on those things first before spending it on an editor. And finally, the third thing to be aware of is that a lot of the authors who swear by editors are the ones who don't take the time to work through the steps we talked about in the previous lesson. So by putting in a little bit more work and effort up front, you're going to literally save yourself hundreds of dollars and still end up with an excellent product at the end. All of that being said, an editor can be a great tool when used properly. So in the description below, as well as in the worksheet, I included some ideas about the different editors you can get, along with recommended places where you can find them. It might sound counterintuitive, but my advice is that you actually write your introduction last. What I found is that when I used to write it first, I found myself limited in how I would write the book because I wanted to stay consistent with what I said in the introduction. So by saving it for the final thing that you write, you'll know exactly where your big idea in your book ended up. And that way you can write an introduction that's a lot more effective. I also want to show you the 6 pieces I use to help my reader get out of the introduction and into the book excited to finish it. So number 1 up here is the hook. Now this can be an interesting story or fact, just something to hook your reader from the very first line of your introduction. Next, we're going to use the bridge. And so this is where we tie in that initial hook and show how it illuminates that big idea that we want to get our reader into. Third is when we actually tell them what the big idea is. But the focus here is not so much what your book is about, but more focused on the benefits that your reader is going to get out of reading your book. So we want to start building that excitement for what's going to happen to them as a result of reading your work. Fourth is when we start building trust. So this is your opportunity to tell a little bit about your story or your achievements. Give the reader a reason to want to listen to you. Number 5 is anticipation. So this is where we want to continue to build their excitement to read your book. So this is where you can give them a taste of maybe some of the sections or chapters that they'll come across in your book. We just want to really give them an idea of what's going to happen to them and what they're going to experience as they continue reading. Finally, we end with a call to action. So this can again be a short paragraph or even a single sentence that says like, all right, let's get started, let's keep reading. We just want to intentionally move our reader from the introduction into the first chapter. And there you have it. That's my advice for writing a great introduction. Save it until the last thing you write. Use these 6 pieces in a creative way to really get your reader excited for what's to come, and your introduction is going to be amazing. What's the first thing people do when they pick up a book? Well, first they might look at the front cover and then scan the back cover, and then they open to the table of contents. Why is that? Because they want to see what chapters are inside the book. And for me, I think that makes chapter titles almost as important as the main book title in getting people excited and wanting to buy and read your book. So in this video, I want to give you 3 tips to help you write awesome chapter titles. Now, number 1 is to actually think of your chapter titles as headlines. In this day and age, people are used to clicking on things, and so we want to use that to our advantage. Instead of just using a word or 2 for your chapter title, use a sentence. In the downloadable worksheet, I actually have the tools that I use to write great headlines for my blogs and also great chapter titles for my books. My second piece of advice is don't just tell them what's in your chapter, but make them want to know. For example, let's say you were writing a book on weight loss and you had a chapter about drinking more water. Which do you think would get your reader more excited? A title that said, drink more water, or another title that said the one thing you need to do to lose weight this week? One tells me what the chapter is about, and one makes me want to know what that chapter is about. My third and final piece of advice is to go ahead and write multiple different examples for chapter titles for every single chapter before choosing one. 99% of the time, the fourth or even ninth one that I write is going to be much better than my first. So my advice is that you write 5 to 10 examples for each chapter and then pick the best one. All right, so there you go. Spending a little bit more time working on your chapter titles is going to go a long way towards helping your reader be excited and wanting to finish your book. There's nothing more frustrating than a book that starts off great but then ends in a fizzle. So we want your conclusion to be as effective and satisfying for your reader as your introduction and the rest of your book was. So in order to do that, I want to show you the 3 pieces your conclusion should have to conclude the journey your reader has taken and invite them into what comes next. Number 1 is the wind down. So your conclusion should start off by acknowledging what they did. They finished your book, which is an awesome achievement. You can also use this wind down portion to remind them of your story or transformation. Something to remind them that they are now closer to the thing that made them pick up the book in the first place. The second piece is the review. So this is where we go back and talk about what they've learned or experienced throughout your book. You don't have to do this in any great detail, just hit some of the high points or the most important pieces you want them to walk away with. This is crucial to helping them feel like reading your book was worth their time. So number 3 and final is what's next. When a reader finishes a book, the natural question they're going to have is, what now? And you want to prep and be ready to answer that for them. This is a great place to provide a link back to your website for a free tool or download so that they can start becoming a lifelong fan of your work. And that's it. A great conclusion concludes your reader's journey and invites them into what comes next. Do that and you will have an amazing end to your book. All right, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to go in and make your own KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing account so that you can start putting your books right on Amazon. I'll go over the few pieces that you need to have ahead of time so you can make sure you have that account made. And then I'll show you what the actual KDP dashboard looks like. So first of all, you can see this is the kdp.amazon.com screen. So if you already have an Amazon account, it will autofill some of your information in there. But either way, there's a few pieces that you're going to need. So again, first step, you go here, kdp.amazon.com. It's real simple. If it's your first time doing it or if you don't have an Amazon account already, go ahead and hit the sign up and it'll walk you through these pieces. Essentially, first thing is really easy, just your name, first name, last name. If you have a publishing company, you do not need, an LLC or anything. You can just do this all through your own name, your own social security number and all that, and a mailing address. So if you choose, the mailing check option or so on, they need a physical address for you. All right, getting paid. So after you fill in your very basic name, address information, you're going to fill in some banking information so that they know where to send your money. Personally, I do the direct deposit option because there's no fee and there's no minimum. So when I was first starting out, you had to get paid at least $100 on Amazon before they would actually send you the money. But now through the direct deposit, they'll send you it, whether you make a quarter or $1,000, like it'll just go in at the end of the month every month. And I believe if you do choose the check option, it actually costs you, I think, $5 for every $100 or something. So it's just a lot easier. Enter all your banking information and it just direct deposit right there, nice and easy. And then last is going to ask for your tax information. So again, you can do this as your own person. You don't need to do it through a business or publishing company or LLC. Just enter, your social security number and answer any of the questions that they have. The whole thing takes less than 5 minutes. So once you do that and you create your KDP account, your dashboard is going to look something like this. Let me make it full screen. So it's going to have 4 different pieces. It's going to have your bookshelf, which is where you're going to do the actual publishing and editing for your content. And over here, you're going to have a reports tab, so you'll be able to see how many books are selling in all the different formats that are tracked through KDP. Then you're going to have a community tab. And this is a really helpful forum. I don't go here as much as I used to, but for a lot of really, the simple things when you're first starting out and they're just little headaches like, look here first, they have a lot of good answers. There's a lot of really helpful people that have spent time answering those questions so that people like me and you, we can just jump on there, get an answer, and get on our way. All right, and the last one is KDP Select, and I'll talk more about what this is and why it's something you should consider when I talk about how to price your books. So again, go ahead and make your KDP account, and then we'll jump into your dashboard, and I'll talk about what you can do in this dashboard. All right, thanks. Okay, in this video I'm going to show you behind the scenes look of how to go in and publish your book on Amazon in under 72 hours. It's really simple. We're going to go ahead and start on the bookshelf tab within the KDP dashboard, and you're going to see near the top here it says create a new title. Now there's an option for ebook and paperback. Both options follow the exact same steps. The only difference is that when you get to the manuscript part, you're either going to be uploading an ebook file, which I usually use Word files, or when you get to paperback, you're going to be uploading a PDF file. That's what I usually use for the formatting. And then again, for the ebook or paperback, you're going to be uploading different cover sizes, whether it's going to be, digital only or something you can hold in your hand. So we're going to click this first option, Kindle ebook, and it's going to take us to this tab. Let me make sure the audio is right. Yep, looks good. Okay. There's 3 tabs in here: the details, the content, and the pricing. Now we're going to go through these pretty quickly. I just want to give you an overview of what you're going to have to fill in or think of ahead of time to make sure your book is ready to go when you're ready to publish it. Now first here we have language. Most of us are going to be publishing in English. Second here is your book title and subtitle. I always recommend that you add a subtitle. Amazon is a keyword based system, so that the more words, not always the more words, but the better you can use the word that you use, the more traffic you're going to drive to your book. I talk about keywords a lot more in the Sell Your Book course, so this is just going to help you fill in this section with the basic information just to get your book up and ready to sell. All right, below that is the series information. If you are going to be writing multiple books, grouping them together in a series is a great way to drive traffic and drive sales from book 1 to book 2 and so on. And again, edition number kind of ties in with series. Author, this is where you put in your own name. And then below that are contributors. So if you are writing a book with another author, or let me show you what the options are. If you want to name your editor, forward, let's say you have someone in your same genre, maybe they have a bigger audience or a similar audience, and you just want to show that collaboration together. You want to click that and then put their name in there. Let's say Bob Gus. And then anything that you put in the author and the contributor tabs will be clickable, meaning that it'll be also searchable by Amazon. So let's say someone is searching for a Bob Gus book, they'll find this book and see me as a related author, and that could also help drive sales to the book. All right, description. This is where the meat and potatoes are of helping people know what your book is about and just have that pull to buy that book. So you want to use this section very well. Talk about not only what your book is, but what your book does. What's that value proposition? All right, below that we have publishing rights. Now, what I teach in this course is writing your own book. So we're pretty much always going to click that first option, I own the copyright. Something I talk about is that as the author and creator of this work, you have worldwide publishing rights, which means your book will be available basically everywhere in the world, and you can publish it in any format, and you can use, let's say there's a great line or idea in there that you want to put on a t-shirt or a poster. You have full access to do any of that because you are the owner of those worldwide rights. That's something we talk about more in other things, and if you have questions or want to jump in the Facebook group, go ahead and talk about that. We can go into a lot more depth. All right, again, keywords is below that, and this is where you want to type in words that's going to help drive traffic to your book. Again, Sell Your Book course, we go into a lot more detail. In categories, you'll be able to select 2 categories. So if you click the little plus, it keeps dropping down different levels. Some of these have lots of levels. Let's see if I can find one with like 5 subgenres. But anyways, you want to click things that are specific, because the more specific the category your book is in, the more likely it's going to rank well in that category, which can help it drive traffic and get more sales. All right, so that's categories. Below that is age and grade range. Depending on the subject or content of your book, if there's language or talk about sex or violence, you might want to have a minimum age reading for that. I don't know when you'd ever use a maximum age for your book, but just so you know, this option is there. And then below that is the option to set your book for pre-order. Now you only have this option for ebooks, not for paperback. And there are times when you want to use this option, but 90% of what we're doing, we're just going to publish the book when we're ready to go. All right, we're going to save and continue. Okay, next page is the content. Now the first one is manuscript. You're going to see something called digital rights management here. Now, without going to like unnecessary detail, this has to do a lot with where your book can be shared in the different formats that's available in. I always keep it on the default of just no. I'm of the belief that getting your book into as many hands as possible is better for the overall mission of what you want to do. Even if that mission is to sell more books, because the more people who have your books, the more people are going to know your name, recommend what you're doing, and so on. So I always keep it at no, because I want that book to be far and wide. Below that, this is where you upload an ebook manuscript. Now, again, I talked about I always just do it in Word. That's a program everyone has access to. It's very simple to use, and the Kindle system converts it perfectly. Now, below here, for the cover, you have two options. You can either use their cover creator, which is something I 100% recommend you do not do. And then below that, you can upload a cover that you have already made that is the right dimensions. Now, in the Sell Your Book course, I show you what different options you can use for that. Whether buying a pre-made cover, making it in Canva, and so on. So upload your cover. And then below that, you'll be able to preview the ebook. Let's see if it's ready to be previewed. And this is going to show you what it looks like in a few different devices. There we go. So, I just wrote a line of text, and if I scroll over, you can see the cover. So that's tablet. This is what it's going to look like on a phone. And this is what it's going to look like on a Kindle e-reader or sideways. So it's cool just to make sure things look the way they're supposed to. Cool. And scrolling back down, last but not least, the option to put in an ISBN. Now, I don't use ISBNs for my books. I know some people have different ideas about this. Kindle will assign your book with a number that makes it searchable and purchasable by not only people on Amazon system, but also outside. I have roughly half a dozen of my books in libraries, mostly in Ohio, and they were purchased right from Amazon. I didn't need any ISBNs or anything for that to happen. And so, I'd recommend just don't even worry about that piece. Below that is a publisher. So if you have made an LLC, or if you have a business that you are going to publish the books through, then you can go ahead and put that name down there. If you don't, then it's just going to say, it'll say, either published through Amazon system or whatever Amazon decides. It's been different a few different times. I use FaithSpring as my main publisher for my Christian nonfiction, so that's the name that I use and I put in there. All right, jumping to the last page here. Boom. So this is the pricing page. Now I made a video just about pricing, but here I just want to show you what it looks like. So in the first one, there's an option for KDP Select Enrollment. I talk about what that actually is in the pricing video, so we'll leave that blank for now. Next is territories. Now, as the author and creator of the work, you have worldwide rights, like I said before, so you can leave that checked. Next, you have royalty and pricing. Now you have two options here. The 35% royalty is the lesser option, but it gives you more breadth. So you can either price very low at 99 cents, or you can go all the way up to $200. So let's say you're writing a very important book that had a very high price point, you could price it at that. But for most people, we use the 70% option, which limits the range we can price in. You can see down here between $2.99 and $9.99. But this is what the Amazon customer is used to paying for ebooks, somewhere between $2.99 and $9.99, depending on the genre that you're in. Now below here, you have the option to price each of these 12 countries individually. I usually go and try to make it match my main price. So like, if I'm doing India, then I'll try to do the $2.99 or so on. Again, in the pricing video, I can go more in depth than that, but just so you know, you have that option to customize those other country price points. Below that is something called the Kindle Matchbook. So if you have, or when you have an ebook and a paper book versions of the same book, you can use the matchbook so that when someone purchases the paperback, they can get the ebook for either a discount or for free. Now, personally, for all my paperback books, I've chosen this option so that they can actually get the ebook version for free. The mentality behind this is that I want my readers to get the books as quickly as possible, and especially if they're in different formats, it makes it very easy for them to pick up where they left off and then finish the book as quickly as they can so that they can become a fan and hopefully read more of my books in the future. So this is a program I highly recommend all of you utilize because it's just a great way to think about your readers and make it easy for them to consume what you've worked hard on. All right, below that, book lending, I always leave this checked. I want people, especially in the Prime system, to get their hands on my books as easy as possible. Below that is terms and conditions. Obviously a lot of details in there. Feel free to read through that. And last but not least, you hit publish and your book will be on Amazon up to 72 hours or less, depending on the time of year. Most of my books have been published in 12 hours or less. It's such an easy system. And I hope this little overview showed you, the different pieces that you need, nothing too crazy. And we go into detail about how to use each of those little pieces to the best so that you can actually sell lots of books that you worked so hard on. All right, thank you. In this video, I want to go over some of the basic things you need to know about pricing your book when you're publishing it on Amazon. So the first thing I'm going to go over are the different pricing structures for your ebook options. So there's two different royalty rates that you can get. The first is 35% and the second is 70%. So there's a few differences between the two. The first 35% allows you to price a little bit lower and a lot higher than the other standard rate. You can price it all the way down as low as 99 cents and all the way as high as $200. And so for whatever you're pricing it in that range, you're getting a third of that price as your payment or the royalty. The second pricing option allows you to price as low as $2.99 and as high as $9.99. So it's a much smaller range, but within that range, you're going to get 70% or about 2/3 of the price of the book paid out to you as a royalty every time someone buys your book. So you can see why when you go to Amazon, there's a lot more books priced between $2.99 and $9.99 because you're literally getting twice as much money per book sale. Now, the reason you might want to price it at the 35% mark is because you want to get that lower price point so you can move more books, maybe around a certain launch or another promotion that you're doing. Or let's say you have a book that's a special edition or you're using that higher price point for some marketing promotion. And so you can go way higher than the normal $9.99 price point that you would normally have as a limit. My advice for first-time authors is to go ahead and price on the lower end of these two price points. So maybe when you're launching your book, go ahead and use that 99-cent price point just to move more books initially. And then maybe after that 30 or 60-day time limit, go ahead and jump the price up to maybe $2.99 or something in that range. You can always go ahead and look at other books in your niche or in the category that you chose and price accordingly. So you don't want to have the highest price book and you probably don't want to have the lowest price book. You want to kind of find something that's in a range that people who read your kind of book are used to paying. Now let's go ahead and jump over to the paperback book options and talk about how you're going to be getting paid out for those. Now when we're talking about paperback books, there's an extra step that Amazon has to take, and that's actually physically printing the book before they can ship it to the person who bought it. And because of that, there's a small additional cost that's going to get factored in when you're trying to calculate how much royalty you're going to get per book. So you can see all of this once you're in the KDP dashboard, and depending on the size of your book, if it's on the low end, about 100 to 200 pages, then it might cost between $2 and $4 to print. When it's on the higher end, it might cost anywhere from $6 to $10 to print. And so that's going to get calculated in. There's also a 60-40 royalty split on the actual sale price of the book. And then everything after that is what you're going to get paid out. So for example, let's say you had a $10 book that you were selling on Amazon, and that book cost $2.50 to print. So Amazon would subtract that $2.50 from the sale price, and then they would give you 60% of what's left as your royalty for the book. Now, when we talk about the range for how you can price your paperback book, the low end is going to be whatever that print cost plus the bare minimum royalty is for Amazon to take. So in my experience, the low end tends to be somewhere around $7, depending on the size of your book. If you have a very short pamphlet book, something under $100, you might be able to price it as low as $4 or $5 and still kind of break even. And then the high end is $250. So let's say you're writing something that is a textbook size or some special edition book, then you can price all the way as high in $250, which is pretty cool for a paperback book. And again, once you make your KDP account and you go into the pricing section for ebook or paperback, they have a nice little pricing page where you can kind of play with the numbers, see exactly how much you're going to make per book sale after printing costs, after delivery costs, and that way you can get an idea of how much you really want to set your book for and how much you can plan on making per book. The last thing I wanted to touch on real quick is KDP Select. What is it and how can it help new authors? So KDP Select is a program done by Amazon that requires you to publish your ebook exclusively through Amazon. So that means it can't be for sale on any other platform such as Barnes & Noble or Kobo or any of the other big ones online. Now, because you're giving them exclusivity with your book, they give you a few different incentives to make it worth your while. And the first one here is KENPC, and basically what that stands for is instead of paying you per purchase of your book, they will actually pay you per pages read. And so that's a part of their Kindle Unlimited plan. So people can pay $10 a month and read unlimited ebooks. And because of that, every time they would check out your book and read through it, instead of paying you for the purchase of your entire book, Amazon actually pays you per pages that that person read of your book. So depending on the size of your book, you might actually get paid more for pages read than you would actually per sale per book. And I know that can be kind of confusing, so I'm going to go ahead and link to an article in the description for this lesson, so that way you can see if that's a strategy that you kind of want to take advantage of with your book. The next kind of incentive for signing up for KDP Select is that you have the opportunity to do a few cool promotions every 3 months. So the first promotion type is a free book promotion. You can give your book away for free for I think up to 5 days, and that's just a cool way to get it in a lot of people's hands, and you can drive a lot more reviews to your book. The second promotion type is a normal discount promotion. So let's say your book is normally priced in this range, the $2.99 to $9.99. You can price it all the way down to 99 cents and still get the 70% rate. So that's something you can do when you are in KDP Select. Just another cool tool to help you sell more books. People love sales, and so if you can really use that to reach your audience or reach new readers, it's definitely a cool strategy to use. Alright, so that was a brief overview of how pricing works within the Amazon system, how to price your ebook, your paperback book, and whether or not KDP Select might be a good idea for you. I hope this was helpful. If you have any specific questions, definitely jump over to our Facebook group, and I'd love to answer those for you. In this video, I'm going to show you how to turn your draft into an ebook ready file that you can publish on Amazon. And I'm going to do this by showing you how to do it in Word. So if you haven't written your book in Word, that's okay. I can link to other tutorials in the description below, but for this video, that's what I'm going to show you how to do, because most people seem to have that software, and through the steps that I'm going to show you, it's actually pretty easy to do. And don't forget, to accompany this video, I also made a checklist that you can follow along with. So let's go ahead and jump right in. You're going to see I have a sort of checklist that I follow. This is always getting edited and updated. You'll see it pop up a few times throughout the video, but the one that you download as part of the course is much more streamlined and user-friendly, so that's the one I recommend you use. So here is my document. You can see it's just a lot of text right now. I pulled a few blog posts and stuff just so I would have text to fill up. It's a short book. You can see it's only like 19 pages right now. There's only 5 chapters or so in it. I just want to make sure I had a good example to show you how to do all the different steps that I'm going to walk you through. The first thing we do is really simple. We're going to go up and save this file as a different name. That's the first thing I always do so that I'm not messing up that initial draft. So we're going to go to the folder that I have it in, and you can do a few different things. What I usually do is literally just add the word ebook to the end of it. That way I know that is the file type that I'm working with. So at the top, you can see the new file, my book draft, and then parentheses ebook. That way I know any of the changes I make are directly in this file and not impacting my only draft of my book. The next step that I do is I go ahead and hit Control A, and you can see that that selects all of my text in the entire book. When you're writing, sometimes formatting and random things can end up in your book that you don't want there. So the first thing I do to eliminate all that is select all of the text, and then I make it all the same size and formatting. You know, we can choose something simple like Calibri, and then we make it all the same size. I usually do 12. And then over here in the paragraph options, I usually make all of the text 1.0. That means just one line spacing, no extra gaps in there. I found that this presents one of the best looking books once it's on Kindle or whatever e-reader the reader uses. And so I do that. And then the last thing I do is I usually remove any of the extra spaces because I want to be in complete control of any spaces that end up in my final book. And you should too, just so that when you work through this file, what you see here is what you're going to end up with on the Kindle, on whatever platform you put it on. Because when you leave these little extras in there, sometimes it can make your final book look much different than you expected. So that's usually what I do. I make sure all the font is the same, all the font is the same size, and then that there's no extra weird paragraph spacing anywhere in my text. We're going to go on and change things like chapter titles and subtitles and so on. But for this step, I just want to make sure I'm starting with basically a clean slate. All right, so the next step I do after that is I actually go through and add in chapter breaks or page breaks in between each chapter. So in order to do this, the first thing I do is, again, in this paragraph section near the top in Word, I hit that paragraph button, that show hide, and it's going to show me all the different formatting stuff that's in the document. You can see I have a blank page to start my document. That's just something I always do out of habit. You can do that or not. When we move on to later steps, you definitely need some blank pages. So, it's really easy to do. All you do is let's go to the front of that and then hit enter a couple times. And then I go up to that very top space and I hit the page break. Right there you can see in the insert tab, page break. So you click page break, boom, and it gives you a new one. Shortcut that you could do is if you right click page break, you can add to quick access toolbar, and mine's grayed out because I've already done that. So if you see at the very, very top of the screen there where my little mouse is, you can see that I insert a page break is on my shortcuts basically. So anytime I need it, I can just pop up there, throw in a few enters, and then click it at the top, and I already have it done. This is a tool that I use consistently, especially if you have 10, 20, 30 chapters and you're making lots of breaks, or if you're doing some interesting formatting just to help your reader move through your book quickly. That's one of the tools that you're going to need a lot. All right, so we added in a few blank pages. I'll show you why those are important later on in the video. But for now, we're going to go through, and at the end of each chapter, we're going to add in a page break. So this is chapter 1, and we're going to find where it ends. If I go down, zoom in a little bit, you can see this is where chapter 2 is. So just a little bit above chapter 2, I'm going to throw in a page break. And that way I'm starting to separate the chapters from each other.
I'm going to scroll down again. There's chapter 3. You can see that. So again, I'm going to throw in a page break. And chapter 4 is here. Page break. Now again, I didn't want to just tell you everything that I'm doing. I figured if I showed you, that might solve some of the issues or questions you have later on. So we're just going to walk through this. And feel free to fast forward past parts if you already know how to do a certain step. But definitely watch it if it's your first time editing a book. Right? We inserted above chapter 5. I think that is the last chapter.
Even though this is the last chapter, I'm going to throw in a couple blank pages at the very end of my file, and you'll see why we do that again later on in the video. I think all of my chapters are divided into their own kind of mini sections. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use formatting to make our chapter titles stand out. And so the easiest way to do this is, what I always do is I throw in 2 paragraph marks, so 2 enters before each chapter title and 2 right after. That just sets it apart, so that way any formatting I'm going to do to the chapter title doesn't affect anything else in the text. If you keep it too close sometimes, it can run over and end up looking weird in your Kindle file. We're going to go ahead and highlight this. This is my chapter 1. So I'm actually going to write chapter 1 before that. This is a personal preference. It's something I do sometimes just to keep things more orderly, especially before I have the table of contents laid out. I'm just going to write chapter 1. And then there's the title. I use the heading 1 option for all of my titles. This is going to make your table of contents very nice and very easy to construct. So I'm going to go ahead and select heading 1 for my chapter. And you can see right now it's kind of a light blue color. And zoom in a little bit. It doesn't really look like a really nice title, chapter title, but we can format all of that. So what we do is highlight it. And back up where heading 1 is, we can right click it, and then there we can hit modify. And now this is where we modify the text to whatever we want. And that way anything we use heading 1 for later on is all going to be formatted the same way. So let me show you what I mean. First of all, I don't want it to be blue. I want it to be the normal black because that's going to show up well in the files. I want to make it bold so that it stands out from the rest of the text. And I want to actually make it a little bit bigger. So we'll make it 18. And we'll go ahead and leave it the same calibre actually. We'll make it the body. So it's similar, and I want it centered. I think that's it for now actually. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Boom. And then bam. See? So now it looks a little bit more like a chapter heading or a chapter title. It stands out, it's bold, it's spaced right in the middle. So that way when someone comes to this, they know this is a new chapter. Really simple. Now we're going to go ahead and scroll down to our chapter 2. Again, I'm just going to make this the same way. So I want 2 little paragraph marks before and 2 paragraph marks after.
Again, these are there because I hit the show hide button, that little paragraph mark. So that's a tool you want on for pretty much the entire formatting process. And when we get to some of the more detailed formatting things, you'll see how helpful it can really be.
All right, so we're going to highlight that again, and I'm just going to tap the heading 1 option, and bam, now it looks exactly like chapter 1.
So now we're just going to go through and do that for the last 3 chapters. Make sure that's all the same. And you see how this chapter was already bold? Doesn't matter, like once you hit the chapter button, anything that is old formatting will be undone by the heading 1 setting. All right, get a little water there. Scrolling down, we have 2 more chapters to go. Let me just make that the chapter title, heading 1, and then 1 more to go. 2, highlight, and heading 1. There you go.
Now all of our chapters have the heading 1 option. They look good. If we zoom out, you can kind of see pretty clearly where the different chapters are differentiated. So the next formatting thing that I usually take care of are the subtitles. Let's go ahead and zoom in to one of these. Now, people do subtitles in different ways. My personal preference is to not use like a heading 2 or a heading 3 option, because when I make my table of contents, I only want my heading 1 to show up. Now there's different settings you can use so that you don't have subtitles showing up in the table of contents. But for me, I try to make the file as simple and clean as possible. So that way I don't have a lot of corrections to make later or errors to fix once I upload it to Kindle. So what I'm going to show you is basically what I do for all of my books. So let's say this section starts off, and then these are the first 3 things. And this is what I want my subtitle to be for the next section. So usually all I do for subtitles is I bold it and I make it 1 size bigger than the rest of my body text. So nothing too fancy. And that way when you're scrolling through, it looks different than the regular text, but it's not as big or bold as the chapter title. Another personal preference is that you can add more spaces when you have a subtitle there, depending on your book or how many subtitles you have.
Let's say the first 3 things was there, and then I have another subtitle right here called The Last 2 Things, right? So those are my 2 subtitles. bold, and one size bigger. And now let's zoom out a little bit. And let's take away the show high just so you can see what it looks like. Yeah, it's pretty good. I could probably even make the chapter titles a little bit bigger if I wanted, but I know like size 18 to 22 usually work really well on Kindle, so I'm gonna leave it there, and I know that my subtitles kind of stand apart. If you have a bunch of subtitles really close together, maybe you might not want to make them as big, because you just don't want them to like take over the page whenever your reader flips through it on the ebook version.
As far as subtitles go, I'm pretty satisfied with that. So after you've taken care of your subtitles, the next options or things you could take care of are things like bullets or numbering. So when you're working with numbers in the text, you can see that these are just kind of there as plain text right now. They're not using the number function. So what I can do is I can like highlight this area and click the numbers button, and then it'll turn it more into the list type. Because the numbers here kind of used to separate the different paragraphs, then I might not use that function just because I want the numbers to stay to the side. So it depends on what you want and what you're going for with your editing. Same thing with bullets. If you have specific questions, you can always shoot me an email. The numbers and bullets are really simple to use. Just play around and try to make it look the way you want it to look. So once I've gone through and taken care of subtitles, numbers, and any bulleted lists, and of course the chapter titles and the page breaks are done with, the next thing I'm going to go through is actually find any spacing that I want to edit or change within the text. So for that, I'm going to make sure my show hide little paragraph button is pressed. I'm going to scroll all the way back up to chapter 1, and I'm just going to go through and make sure that things look the way I want them to look. So again, in between chapters, are there at least 2 paragraph or enter things before and after? That's just going to make it look nice when someone turns to that page. In between paragraphs, are there at least 1 space? And again, this is why I removed the add space before or after the paragraph, because again, I want us to be in control of how many spaces end up in my final book.
So 1 space in between each is perfectly fine. If you have, this is like a random text, if you have random things that need more spacing, feel free to do that. Let me go through, like I want to make sure, as you can see here, in between each kind of subheading or number in the actual paragraph is at least 1 space. So I'm going to go through and make sure that looks like that. Number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7.
Let's say you have a paragraph like this one that looks kind of big. You want to remember that when people read ebooks, they're either reading on a Kindle, which can be about, however many inches that is, or they're reading on a phone, which is actually where I read a lot of my ebooks. And so having even a block of text that's this big, that's maybe, 5 to 8 sentences long, not that long of a paragraph normally, but when it's in ebook form, it can seem very large. And so if I found something like this in my text, I might actually just throw in an extra space in there to break up the paragraph, so long as it made sense and it didn't make the idea that I was communicating broken up. Use your own kind of preference and understanding of whether or not that's a good idea. But if you see very, very large paragraphs, if you break them up, it's just going to make your reader experience a little bit better.
All right, so let's keep scrolling through and finding other places. So again, I wanted 2 spaces before each subtitle. That looks good to me. I want enters again in between each of the, or above each number. So again, you can see that it kind of threw in another number here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit backspace, and then here I'm actually going to turn off the number thing. So that way it doesn't give me that. All right, going through, I might do it again. Nope, it's good. All right, and in between each one, just throwing in some extra spacing.
A rule of thumb is that you never want more than 4 of these paragraph spaces anywhere in your document. If you have 4 together, sometimes Kindle will read that, or other e-readers will read that as a completely blank page. You can see here that I have 4 together. If there was a reason to have that many, then I would probably leave it. But as soon as I added a 5th one or so on, that's when I'm in trouble of messing up the chapter flow and adding in a blank page where it doesn't need to be. So remember that 4 or less paragraph spaces anywhere in your document.
I'm going to throw in 2 just so that bulleted points stand apart. And again, I'm going to add 2 right after them so that they have their own kind of section in the text. I'm going to keep scrolling. I'm going to zoom out again so I can kind of move through. I actually like having 2 pages when I'm formatting because it gives me more of a 1,000-foot view of what my book is going to look like. Moving through here, I can see that this is actually a subtitle that I missed, so I'm going to go ahead and format that the way I want it.
Let me show you something actually. You see how this is a bigger text than this? So if I hit enter after that, I'm actually going to get bigger spaces than I normally would. So when you're working with subtitles or anywhere where you're going to have bigger than normal text, don't do the enters or spacing on that line. Go down to where the paragraph is. Let me just highlight it so you can see. Go in front of that paragraph and then hit the enters. You see how they look a little bit smaller? That's what you want to do, because if you end up with these big paragraph spacing, again, it can make your final file look just a little bit weird in the final product.
I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. I'm actually going to add one before it. So that's 2 before the subtitle, then the paragraph. We're going to keep going down. Everything looks pretty good. You can see on this page, all of the paragraphs are pretty close together, so I'm going to make sure that they're all broken apart. I don't want someone to come to my page and just read huge blocks of text. That's not going to be a good reading experience. All right, throwing in a few more. Looks good. And going through, make sure, it looks like these are a little close again, so I'm going to space them out. And if you see things like this, you can also turn it into a paragraph. So you see how there's all these single lines together. If that was on purpose, then I'd leave it, but this is a book product, so I want to make sure that my books feel together and have paragraphs and so on like that. So it looks good. Yeah, we're going to keep going down. Everything looks pretty evenly spaced out. We're almost done here. Scrolling through, this looks like it could be a subtitle. So again, as you catch things, as you go through your book, feel free to use whatever step you're on and just make all those little catches. So we're going to make sure everything looks good. Again, there's some closeness here. I'm going to add in a space or two, make that a paragraph. All right, I think we are done with our 5 chapters. Good. Yeah, I picked 5 chapters because I felt like that was enough to show you a few of the random things that you can have going on. If I just showed you 1 chapter, there wouldn't be enough nuance in there. If I showed you 10, then this video would be twice as long. So we're going to keep it at 5 just so you get a good idea of what's going on. Okay?
One of the fun things about editing and formatting your own book is that you get to decide what it looks like, and you have 100% control over that. For better or worse, of course. All right, and one more spacing item is I make sure at the bottom of each chapter are 2 spaces. Just another personal preference. I found that it makes the file work well. All right, we're back at the beginning. Now, this is where we're going to add in another checklist that I've added to your downloadable worksheet. Let me pull up just an example here. Do you see these highlighted words? These are the additional pages we have to add in so that your book feels like a complete book ready to read and buy. Now, in a separate lesson, I broke down what all of these are and why they matter. So we're just going to go through and do the formatting piece of getting these together. So the first thing I want is a title page. This is where I'm going to give the name of my book. See, it's good that we're doing this together. So when you have weird things happen, you know that you can work them out. You see how these spaces are a little bit further apart than the ones in our actual text, or even than these here. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to make sure that my formatting is correct. So you can see here that the remove space option I did in my text didn't hold true for whatever reason in this piece. So I'm just going to go through, remove space after paragraph, and make sure that it's 1.0. And that way I just make sure that from the beginning of my book to the very end, they all have the same format. That shouldn't happen so long as you're doing the Control A at the very beginning and formatting everything. But hey, this is technology. Weird things happen, which is why I wanted to walk you through it beginning to end. So we're just going to call this title of my book. And below that is my name. And that's pretty much all you have on your title page. So I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger. There are a lot of formatting options that you can do on this page. And the title page is pretty open to interpretation. I wouldn't have anything like size 72 because that's not going to look good in your Kindle book. Biggest I would go is probably, no bigger than 24. Because you got to remember, people are reading this on a phone, on a tablet. And so even though it might not look that big on this page, when you're looking at it from the e version, it's going to look much bigger. So I might leave the title of my book at 24, and then my name, I always make it smaller than the title. Maybe I'll leave that at 18. You see how that space is big? That was an issue when we were trying to work out in the actual chapters. But for this title page, again, it's pretty open to interpretation. So don't feel like it has to be anything too drastic. I like to move my title a little bit further down. So I'm just going to put 2 spaces before and 2 spaces after. It's going to feel a little bit more centered, not perfectly in the center. You can throw half your title below the book if you want. That looks good to me. So we're going to jump over now to the copyright page. And there are a couple of things you want to make sure are on here. In that other lesson, I'll actually have the format I use for making sure my work is copyrighted appropriately. The first thing I do is throw in the copyright symbol. Now you can find this in the symbols of Word, but I found like it can take a long time to find it in there. So what I usually do is just Google real quick the symbol word and then copy that over and paste it into Word. It saves me about a minute of looking for it. I usually put the year and then by David Ramos or some format of that. In the other lesson, I'll have the format that you can follow. And then I usually have like the text, all rights reserved. I might have some conditions after that, or like a contact email if people want to use portions of my work for random things that they might want to do. And then underneath that, depending on the type of book I'm writing, I might have additional copyright information. So let's say I'm using a significant portion of another book or another work of art, then I'm going to make sure I include whatever I need to include on this page. If I'm using things like Bible verses or so on, like works from history or works from religion, this is also a place where you want to enter what kind of translation you're working with or other important details like that. So the copyright page is just where you cover a lot of those legal things and a lot of the important info that's going to be used later on when Amazon or other retailers are publishing your book and making sure that you have all the necessary rights and protections for your book. So for this example, I'm just going to go ahead and write other copyright information just so that we know it goes there. And then I'm going to hit the center, and that's basically it. Of course, a copyright page is going to have more text than that, but that looks a pretty good start to me. I don't do too much formatting on here. I don't worry about how many spaces are in between. I just make sure that it looks half decent and that the people who need to read it know where to find it and that it's readable. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down. So the next page I usually add in here is going to be a series or dedication page. Let me just type that in here. And those are pretty self-explanatory. If my book is part of a series, I'm going to make sure that I'm listing all the other books in that same series, or if I'm dedicating this book to a family member or a friend, this is where I'm going to do it, usually after the copyright page and before the rest of the front matter that we're going to be working through. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and bold the text and just add in my text so I know that there's other things that go there. You'll notice that I don't use the heading 1 or any of the heading settings when I'm working on front matter, because I want the first thing that Kindle kicks to when they open up my book to the table of contents. And I don't want the things like my series page or other items in the front matter to end up on my table of contents, which I'm going to show you how to make in a minute. So overall, if you want to have like your heading or so on stand apart in these first few pages, then just bold it or make it bigger or do something along those lines to make it stand apart. But I don't recommend using the heading setting because I don't want it to feel or act like an actual chapter in my book. Okay, so after that, we're going to go ahead and you can see that we're already kind of up against chapter 1. So what we need to do is make a couple more blank pages. Really easy to do. We're just going to hit that page break button again that I have. So entered another blank page, and I'm actually going to do it one more time. There we go. Now we have 2 blank pages on top of everything else. So on this page, after my series or dedication page, and you can kind of see that the spacing is off. So let me make sure spacing looks good. Cool. All right, see, that's why we do it together. So on this page, we are going to go ahead and do either free gift or ask for a review. Your preference on what you want to actually include on this page, my recommendation is that you do use it to some degree, either to drive people to your website or to some other product or material that you have that could help them, that is in line with the topic or big idea of the book. Or if you just want to use that page to say, hey, this is my first book, I'd love if you'd review it. Something along those lines, just to kind of put it in their mind that you are going to ask them for a review, either at the beginning of the book or at the end of the book, or something in their mind to prompt them. So one thing that I've tried in my book is I say, hey, if you have a wow moment or an aha moment during reading my book, go ahead and put it down for a second and write a review on Amazon, because that's a big help to me. That way, the book starts off putting in their mind that, hey, when I come across something I really like, that should trigger to go write a review for the book. And obviously, because it's a positive trigger, they're going to go write, hopefully, a positive review. Use this page in some creative way to either drive people back to where you want them to go or ask for a review. All right, so I'm just gonna add in, please review my book. Just something simple so that there's text there. And then, so making sure the formatting looks good. After that, we have a blank page, and I'm actually going to leave this one blank for a minute because this is where our table of contents is going to go. And that's actually the last thing I usually do, and you're going to see why in a minute here. Next, we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom. So once we're at the very bottom of your document, right after the conclusion, which I don't have an introduction or conclusion in this little formatting example, but they work the same way as chapters. So just treat your intro and conclusion as if it's a chapter. Now, we're going to go ahead, and the first thing I include after my conclusion is another page asking for a review. And in this page, I'm usually very explicit about why reviews matter and where they can go to leave the review. Usually I might even ask them a question to answer in the review. So tell me the best thing you liked about this book, or tell me one thing you think this book could have done better. Just something so that they feel like they have a duty to do or a thank you to go and do that review for me. So please review my book. So I do that again right after the conclusion because I want them to go and do that as soon as they finish the book. Now, the one thing I do differently about back matter versus front matter. So front matter comes before the book and back matter comes after the book. In back matter, I use the same heading settings that I use for chapters because I actually do want these things to end up in my table of contents. Again, this is a personal preference, but this is something I found that works really well because once people finish the book, they want to know that there's additional information to let them keep going on the journey that they were on with you through the book. Again, this is personal preference, but I found that it's a really helpful way just to close the book in a professional way.
So we're going to go ahead and format this like we would a chapter. So we're going to make that heading 1. We're going to make sure there's 2 paragraph symbols or enters before and after. And there we go. Now it's treated like a real chapter, and it's going to show up in our table of contents when we make that.
So after the ask for a review page, we're going to scroll down and we're going to make the about author page. Again, I'm going to make this like a chapter. So let me make it about the author. And I'm going to say, this is David. Enter in your information. Great place again to link back to your website or other work you've done. Now we're going to add in some more blank pages so we have some room to work with. After my about author page, I usually do something along the lines of additional reading or more books by, and then my name. So this is just an additional way to show that you are kind of an expert on the topic or that you're a resource these people can go back to. The additional reading part is a great place to put links to some of the research you did for the book. So if you took out books from the library, or there were articles you read or YouTube videos that you watched, go ahead and put them in this link. You can also call it resources. Let me do /resources. And that way people who are really interested in your topic or who want to dive in a little deeper can use some of the same info that you use to construct your book.
So again, let me go ahead and format this page. It looks like the spacing is a little big again, so let me highlight all of it and make it the way I want it to. Good. And throw in spaces before. We're going to make that like a normal chapter. And then here you are. There we go. All right. Now these are formatted the way I want it to. I'll make sure there's 2 paragraph enters before the end or the final page break. And then
after this, it's pretty much your personal preference. If you did footnote or endnote in your book, this is where they would show up. So let me go ahead and format that again. Everyone. Okay, so let me show you what a footnote or endnote would look like. Now, if you are using footnotes and endnotes, you would typically do that during that in-between process when you're working on bullet lists or numbered lists or subtitles. During that time frame is a good time to go through and make sure that all of your endnotes or footnotes work the way you want them to. Another quick note is that I use endnotes in my ebooks because footnotes won't always show up. You know how footnotes show up at the bottom of a book normally when it's paperback? They won't really do that in an ebook version because they just want to show the normal body text. They're going to show up at the end anyways, and so just to make your formatting simple and useful, go ahead and just use endnotes from the beginning. If you are writing a book that requires footnotes to be a part of it, then when you are doing the ebook version, still use endnotes, but then when you go format the paperback version, that's when you want to choose the footnote option. And then we can format accordingly so that they actually show up on the pages that you want them to show up on. Just to show you real quick what a footnote would look like, I'm going to go ahead and throw one in at the end of the sentence. So you can go ahead to, I believe it's references. and we're going to insert EndNote. You can see at the top here, the footnote section. So we're going to insert EndNote, and it kicks me all the way to the very last page underneath the page break. Let me turn off the paragraph symbol so you can see it. See that little number 1? And this is where I put any information related to my notes. So if you're citing an article or a book, just making sure your argument is well supported, this is what you would do. Your endnotes end up all the way at the very bottom of the last page. So that way you know where they are. And again, you can format these however you like. I usually leave the default setting on these, which is about a size or 2 smaller than the normal text. Okay, so let me turn on the paragraph symbol. So again, after your additional reading pages and before your endnotes, you can pretty much add anything else you would like. If you have additional pictures like a map or something, or if you have some other promotion that you're doing, this is a great place to put it. Just something else to entertain your reader as they're flipping through the last few pages of your book. But overall, this is pretty much a finished ebook file. So I'm going to zoom all the way out so you can kind of see what it looks like. So if we scroll up, you can see we have the few different back matter pages. We have our chapters scrolling all the way up. Everything is nice and broken up by the page breaks. And then at the front, we have the title, the copyright page, the dedication page or a series page, and then the free gift or ask for a review page. So now all we have to do is create the table of contents, and then our ebook file is pretty much all done. All right, so in order to do the table of contents, we're going to go ahead, put our cursor right on that last blank page, jump up to the References tab in the ribbon, and then over there in the left-hand corner, you're going to see Table of Contents. So we're going to click that, and we're actually going to go down to Custom Table of Contents. And this is going to give us a few different options. First of all, you can choose from a few different formats or templates. I like to use the simple one. I usually end up editing some of the formatting anyways. And then I like to hide page numbers. You don't want page number to show up in your ebook version because that's not really how like Kindle and so on or read your book once it's in that format. So just take away page numbers. It'll be much easier to use for your readers in the end. All right, and then all we do is hit OK. And you can see here that what it did was pull our heading 1 titles from every single chapter and our back matter. So now I'm going to go ahead and format this the way I want it to look. I want it to be a little bit bigger, and I don't want it bold, and I want the back matter to actually be a little bit separate from the rest of the chapters. That way when you click away, you can kind of see that here is the main heart of the book, and then over here is like the additional information. So again, like all the rest of the text, we can format it, we can make it a little bit closer together, a little further apart, whatever your preference is. Let me do the show hide again. Then at the very top, it's important to make sure that you write table of contents. Now, depending on the format or the template that you use, sometimes it'll add in the table of contents already, but a lot of times when you're making your custom one, you have to do that additional step. So I just write table of contents and then I highlight it, and then at the very top of the home tab in the styles little area, if you hit the down arrow, you're gonna get a bunch more. And over here is an option that says TOC heading, and TOC stands for table of contents. So if I click that, you're going to see that I have my table of contents heading. And it's actually important that you use the TOC heading that's in Word for that little piece, because when Amazon or the other e-retailers that you might upload your book to, when they read your book or scan it, they want to make sure that there is a table of contents. And if you don't have that little piece of formatting, they might read it as not having a table of contents, and then you could get an error for your book. Or sometimes, like in a very drastic scenario, they might not even publish it because they might really want you to make sure you have that table of contents up in the front.
And again, just like every other heading that we've done, you can format it the way you want. So we're going to right click it, modify. Pretty much all I'm going to do is make it in the center. I don't mind that it's blue. I think it kind of sets the table of contents apart. And do the show hide, and there you go. So I have my table of contents, I have my 5 chapters, and then the back matter.
Now the cool thing is you can kind of see when I hover over it, it says control click. And that's because like when you upload the file to Amazon, your readers are going to be able to click on the link and it's going to take them right to that chapter. And there you go. So that's pretty much all you need to do to finish turning your Word file, your .doc.docx, into a ebook ready file. So all I'm going to do is save it, and I am saving it as a Word document. Let me just show you one more tip when we're working through different formatting pieces. If I do Control F, that's like the find option, so I can look for a word. We're going to go ahead and jump over, and you can actually work through your book by the different headings that you listed. So let's say I was going through and formatting chapter 2, and I remembered, oh, I want to do that same thing in chapter 5. Well, instead of scrolling all around like I showed you in the video, but you can do shortcuts like opening up the Control F, scrolling over to headings, and then just clicking around, and that way it gets you through your book a little bit faster. So your first book might take you a little bit longer as you format it, figure out the way you want it to look and feel. But overall, long as you get those main points that I talked about in this video, making sure that your chapters look a certain way, feel a certain way, making sure that your front matter and back matter are complete, making sure that your table of contents is constructed appropriately. Other than that, if you get those big pieces done, then your book is going to be ready to go. And that's it. So if you followed along with this video, if you followed along with the checklist that goes with this video, you should be basically ready to publish your book. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to turn your file into a paperback. And the starting point is actually using this same ebook file and then turning that into a paperback file, because we've already taken care of like 80% of the steps with this video. And so the paperback version goes really quickly. So all right, if you have any formatting questions, definitely make sure you can shoot me a message, or even faster, go ahead and jump into the Facebook group. I'll be able to answer them there. And congratulations, let's get your book published. Welcome back. In this video, we're gonna go through turning your ebook file into a paperback file. So I have a checklist in that downloadable worksheet for Module 7 that you can follow along, kind of talking about the essential things that you need to do. If you already know some of the steps, go ahead and fast forward to the steps you don't know. And so I have the ebook file that we were working on from the previous video. We're gonna start with this same file and turn that into a paperback book. So we're gonna save it as the same name, but now we're just going to add paperback to it. And that way I know that this is my paperback file, and so any changes I make to this one will only affect this one and not my original draft or my ebook file. So the next step that I do is actually go in and I change the layout to the margins that are going to fit the size of book that I chose. Now in the description for this module, I'm going to include a link where you can actually go to the Amazon KDP website and download pre-made templates for the different book sizes that you might want to use. Pretty much all of my books are 5x8. Let me show you that size. So you can see this is a 5x8 book. It's a little bit bigger than my hand. This one is, I think, 180, about 180 pages. See, it's a pretty good width. I get emails at least once a week about people saying, they read my entire book in one sitting, and I think having a size that's 5x8 or 6x9 is doable for that, because we want people to not feel intimidated by a gigantic old book, or if your book is 600 pages for whatever reason, then maybe picking a bigger size might be good. But for the majority of what we're creating and what I walk you through in the course, 5x8 or 6x9 would be perfect. And again, you can go to the link in the description that's going to give you templates so you can see what margin sizes they chose. And with that, when I was first starting out, you could even copy and paste your text into their templates and just go from there. But everything I'm going to show you, turning your ebook into the paperback file, is actually very simple, and it actually ends up with a much better product. So you have a few different options there. I just want to make sure you're aware you don't have to make the exact same size book that I'm going to show you how to make, but you're going to use all the same steps to make whatever size book you want. So I already wrote down the margins I'm going to need, so I'm just going to show you how I would go about doing that. So I go up in the left corner for the layout tab, then I'm going to head over and I'm going to hit size, and I want my paper size to be the size of the book. I know that that's going to be 5x8. And then I'm going to hit OK. Right after making that change, you can already see that it starts to look more like a paperback book, like the individual pages and whatnot. So now we're going to go ahead and change the margins. We're going to go to margins. We're going to hit custom margins. And again, all of these settings are going to depend on the size book that you want. and they're going to be available in the templates at the link that I provided. So you won't have to guess about any of this stuff. It's going to be really simple. Let me just go through 0.76 for top, left, and bottom. So let me type that in real quick. And then 0.6 for right, the header and footer. Change that to 0.35. Section start is continuous. All right. So I think we are all set. Cool. So that should be that whole step. You change the size of your book, you change the margins of your book, and now when you scroll through, you should see that there's a little bit of offset. So when a page starts on the right, let me zoom in a little bit. So as you flip the book, each page, the left versus right page, needs to be a slightly different size. And so changing the margins ahead of time makes it do that for us, so that as we go through and format the rest of the text in the book, it's going to look the way it's supposed to look on every single page. My next step is that I like to go and justify all the body text in my entire book. This just makes the book look very professional. Let me show you what justified means. So you see how, let's see if I can show you there, how it's a nice clean cut on either side, nice straight line. That's what we want our body text to look like inside our book. We don't want it to look like, you see this, how it's kind of jagged all along the right edge there. We want to fix that so that it looks nice and professional. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and justify all of this text. Now, one thing to note as you go through and do this is when you have things like subtitles or bulleted lists, you don't want to highlight and justify those because that'll mess up the spacing that you designed for that. So usually I just go through and I select it paragraph by paragraph or section by section. And again, this can be a little time consuming, a little tedious, but it makes the final product look so good that it's definitely worth doing.
Or I can speed this up, and I'm just going to go through and make sure all the text in my body of my chapters are all justified and look the way I want them to. Just going to go through and do all this.
If you're listening to this, just know that I believe in you. I promise you. It takes time and a little bit of effort, but you just have to have a little bit of faith and a little bit of hope. You can do it.
After all of my body text in my book is justified, that's when I'm going to go back through and see if I want to change any of the font for my chapters, subtitles, or body text. I usually wait until this stage because now I can get a better idea of what the spacing looks like, what the size looks like, and now I just have a better feel for what my finished product might feel like when it's in book form. And as you know, we already did some of the formatting when it was in ebook version. So all of the chapters and subtitles are already formatted ahead of time. One additional step that I usually do when I'm turning something into an ebook is that I try to center things or space things a little bit more generously. So for example, on the title page for my book, I'm going to turn on the show hide and I might just kick it down a few notches so that it's a little bit more centered on the page. Now with that, the rule that I talked about where you shouldn't have more than 4 paragraph symbols or enters in a row when you're working on an ebook format, that doesn't really apply in paperback because there's no computer trying to read what you're doing. You're literally just submitting a PDF file that's going to get printed out the way that it looks right there. So feel free to kind of use whatever formatting you want. You can be a little bit more generous with spacing and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. I'm okay with those being that way. I think I am going to space my chapters down a little lower. Another trick that I showed before, if you hit Control F, that brings up a navigation pane so that you can, find whatever things you're looking for. But along with these, you also get the option to choose headings in this corner. And that way, I know I want to spend some time jumping to each chapter and making them a little bit lower. So now I can do that a little bit quicker than just scrolling. I hit chapter 1 and I already did that. So I can jump to chapter 2. Pop in a few more spaces, chapter 3, do the same thing, and it just saves me a few seconds just by using this method instead of scrolling. And yep, those look good to me. I'll leave those the way they are. So after I do that, the next step I do is completely optional, but I find that it just adds a nice little flair or design to the book, is I go to the first letter of every chapter and I use the drop cap function. And so this makes your letters or the front page of your chapters stand out. Let me show you what that looks like. So right there you can see a very big M to kind of start off the chapter, and it just makes it look nice and professional, makes it look like a well formatted book. And to do this is really easy. You just highlight the letter that you want to drop cap, and then there's a long way to go find it, but I usually just go ahead and search drop cap, and you see the option is right here, add a drop cap. And I usually always choose dropped, not in margin, because I want the text to kind of wrap around it. So I just click drop, and there it is. Now it's big, and it's going to show up really nicely when we submit the PDF to Amazon. Now again, with all those things, you can go ahead, pull up the option. You can right click it, and you're going to have the option to add it to the quick access toolbar, and that means it's going to be up in that corner. So again, if you have 15, 20, 30 chapters, you don't want to go ahead and be searching for this every single time. You just want to make it a little bit shorter, and so that's what I usually do. I just throw it up in that upper left-hand corner, and that way it's really simple to click the button whenever I need it.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and jump through the other 5 chapters and add my drop cap. So again, I'm using that navigation function to move through the text pretty quickly. All right, just a couple more chapters. And last one. Okay.
I usually only do my normal body text or the content of my book. I usually don't drop cap the rest of the front matter or the back matter. Again, this is just personal preference, so feel free to do whatever works well for you or for how you want your book to feel. The next step that I do is I go through and I make sure all the spacing in my book feels and looks the way I want it to. So again, this can be personal preference, but let me show you what I mean. So you know how when we went through the ebook and I made sure that the paragraphs were at least 1 or 2 spaces apart? I'm just going to go ahead and do that again, but now that it's in paperback format, I might add or subtract certain spaces. So as I scroll through, for example, on this first chapter page, I can see that this first paragraph seems kind of big. And so if I could break it up in a way that didn't mess up the idea that it was communicating, that's something I would do. So just throwing in 2 enters or 2 paragraph marks, you see, just kind of makes it a little bit more readable. So it's not just one giant block of text as soon as someone comes to the first page of my book. I would kind of do things like that as I scroll through. If there's anything that stands out to me, if I want something to stand apart, like a certain sentence or a quote, I just go through and I make sure things feel and look the way I want them to. Usually this includes breaking up big paragraphs, making the subsections stand apart in a big way, or just highlighting and doing random font fixes.
So as I go through, I'm not going to do too much in this example. Again, it's a lot of personal preference, but I just want to see if any other big things stand out to me. So like this page, there's a lot of small spacing, and that might have been on purpose for the ebook version, but maybe for this paperback book, as long as it makes sense and it's a complete thought, then I would bring them together and make them more cohesive as a paragraph, because that's what people are used to reading when they're reading a paperback book. You have a lot of freedom and creativity here. Just find how you want your spacing to be. And as I scroll through, I think everything looks pretty good and pretty much the way I want it to look.
This brings me to the next step. And again, this one is optional, personal preference, but we're going to examine the blank pages in this book and determine whether or not we want them to be there, and then whether or not we want to add any additional blank pages to make our book look the way we want it to. For example, I prefer all of my chapters to begin on the right-hand page. Let me show you what I mean. So you see how when someone opens the book, they're going to be looking at the right-hand page, and that's where I want my new chapter to start. On this example, I had text, so it made that chapter naturally start on the next page. But let's say the text ended on the page before. What I would do is add in an additional blank page here so that my chapter started on the same page every single time. So the reader gets used to seeing the new chapter on the same side of the book when you're reading. This is something really easy to accomplish. We're going to scroll all the way back up. I usually like to leave it in the 2-page view. When you open the book right away, your title page is going to be the first thing they see, and that's going to be on the right-hand side of your book. So if you want your chapters to start on that same side, then you want to make sure that every chapter page is on that same side within the Word document. So for example, title of the book is on the right and my copyright is on the left, right behind the title page. That's all fine. And now my table of contents would be on the right side because it's on the same side as the title page, but my chapter title would actually be on the back of the table of contents, and so it would start on the left side of the book. And that's not what I want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in an additional page break. So I'm just going to throw it in You can throw it in on either page that you want. But now you see that my chapter starts on the right side of the page, the same side that the title of my book starts on. And so that's what I'm going to go through, and I'm going to make sure that every chapter starts on the same side of the page.
Jump to chapter 2. You can see that this one already happened naturally because there was text on the left side, and now my chapter's on the right. We jump to chapter 3. You can see I need to do the addition again, so I'm going to add in a page break, and that's going to give me exactly what I want. If you add a page break at the very top of the paragraph symbol, we're going to jump to chapter 4. All right, I need to add another blank page there. And then chapter 5, we do it one more time. And now when we come to the back matter, this is again personal preference. So it looks like there's already a blank page that worked out, and I like my back matter to usually start on the same side. So ask for a review starting on the right side of the page. That way people are used to reading it, used to seeing something new when they turn to that page. And that's pretty much all you need to do for that step.
I just like to make sure there's consistency when my reader is working their way through my book. Just another added level of professionalism, and makes your book stand apart when your reader is getting it off Amazon, pulling it off the shelf. Just makes for a really good reading experience. One of the last steps that we do as part of the paperback formatting is we're going to insert page numbers. I want to show you how we do this. So there's a couple ways. One of the simplest ways is we're going to go to insert, and we're going to choose page numbers. I usually do bottom of the page. That's just how I like my books to feel. And I usually actually do it in the center of the page. One thing I do always do is I make sure that you see how there's options up on the top ribbon, is I choose a different first page. And that's because I actually want my title page to not have a number on it. So if you click that option, you'll see that that first title page number goes away, and now the rest of my text has exactly the numbers that I want. Now there are additional ways that you can do it. You can use section breaks to make sure that everything before your table of contents uses one set of numbers, such as like Roman numerals, and then the rest of your text uses normal numbers like that, and that it can start at 1. This is more of an advanced feature. If you want me to show you how to do that, I'll make a separate video just so you have that option. So let me go ahead and close the header and footer, and now you can see that our entire book has all the numbers that it needs. The step after that is we want those numbers to show up in our table of contents. So in order to do that, I'm just going to jump over to the References tab, make sure my cursor is in the table of contents itself, and we're actually going to insert an entirely new table. You can do whatever kind you want. You can use the automatic ones if you want to use those features. I usually always use a custom one because I don't like to have the tab leader, so I'm gonna leave these off. But I do want to show my page numbers. I do want them aligned to the right, and that's pretty much all I need to do. I can go ahead and use the simple format again. That's what I used for the ebook version. This is your preference. Hit OK, and there we go. You can see that the page numbers are in our table and they're aligned to the right.
Now, I don't want these to be bold necessarily, so I'm just going to do a little formatting on this, and I think that looks good. Let me turn off the show and hide and just see what that looks like. Again, that looks like a really good table of contents. You can see that some of my chapter titles are really long, and they kind of run all the way into where the page number is. So that's something we can change really easy. I'm going to hit the show hide button again, and I'm actually going to go and put my cursor right after that too. And I'm going to hold down shift and hit enter. And you see that's going to throw half of the line, half of the chapter title, right onto the second line. So it just looks a little bit cleaner when people are scanning through the table of contents. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this additional reading. And there you go. You can see that the number for that chapter aligns with that second line of text, so it just looks really clean, and now there's no like huge sentences running across the entire table of contents.
After this, I usually like to go and scroll through my book one more time just to see if I catch any weird formatting issues or text issues. And as you can see, it's a pretty clean product. Let me zoom out all the way so I can see a bunch of pages at once. It looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and save this as a PDF. That's the file type that we're going to upload to Amazon when it's time to publish.
So I'm going to go ahead and do the PDF. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and then in my folder, I'm just going to leave it the same name, but I'm going to choose PDF file type and hit Save. And that's going to give me a printable version of everything that we did, and it pops right up. So let me make that full screen so you can see it. Zoom out a little bit.
And now in the PDF, you can kind of see the offset a little bit more dramatically. Some of the text pages are a little bit more to the right or a little bit more to the left. And that's again because of whether or not it's printed on the right or left side of the page. And one thing to know is the bigger your book, the bigger the margin's going to be in the side of the book, because there's more pages that need to be held on to that spine. So again, I'm going to link in the description to the templates that Amazon provides. And I believe they also have a calculator that will tell you, if your book is past a certain point in pages, it's going to need a different sizing of margins and so on. So I'll make sure all that's linked in the description. so you don't have to worry about that. But as we scroll through, you can see it already looks like a really good paperback book. I'd be excited to get this and read through it. There you have it. These are pretty much the basic steps you need in order to turn your Word document into an ebook file, and your ebook file into a print-ready PDF. It's really easy to do as long as you follow the steps that I've included. There's a checklist again in the downloadable worksheet for Module 7. So go ahead and follow that along and you'll have a finished product like this. You can see we did it in about half an hour, a little less than that. When you're doing it your first time, and of course you're going to have a bigger book than just 40 pages, it's going to take you a little time, so make sure you just block off maybe an hour or two to go through it and just learn the process, learn how you want things to look, and it's going to save you a lot of money and time in the long run. I know formatters can charge as much as $1 or $2 a page. So if you have a normal size book, which is about 150 to 200 pages, that could cost you anywhere from $300 to $400 just to do what we did in about half an hour. And again, it might take you a little bit longer the first time or two that you do it, but over time you're going to learn how you want things to be, and it's going to become a much quicker process. All right, so thank you again for watching, and I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next lesson. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to use sections to do some of the more advanced features when it comes to formatting your paperback book. Now, I'm going to start with exactly the same paperback file that we talked about in that previous video, so that way you can see exactly how I'm getting from point A to point B. We'll probably run into a few bumps along the road. That's just what happens when you're dealing with technology and formatting. But I'm going to do it all along with you, so hopefully you'll see exactly what buttons I press and what options I choose. That way, if you have any questions or get stuck anywhere along the way, this video will help you fix those issues. The first thing I want to do is actually play with the page numbers, because I want my page numbers to start when my actual book starts, and anything before that I want it to be in Roman numerals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on the show hide button. And now in order to do this, you see that we've used page breaks a lot in our formatting. Now we're going to start adding something called section breaks. And again, you can find this by going to insert. What I usually do is you can look up section, insert section breaks, and then make that a shortcut for your quick access toolbar. So you see down here, section breaks, there's 4 different ones: next page, continuous, even page, and odd page. The one I always use by default is the next page, and you'll see why as we kind of work through the text. So I made that one already part of my quick access toolbar, and that's what I'm going to be using a bunch as we go through this video. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a section break after my table of contents, because that's when I want my numbers to revert from Roman numerals to normal numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and add in next page. And now you see that my numbers have not done anything too drastic. The number 6 disappeared. That's because of the settings that we have. I'm going to go and select the numbers down here, and let's see. So you see it automatically pulled up my header and footer tools, and you see that it's linked to the previous section. So I want to actually change that, and I'm going to unlink it to the previous. First of all, I'm going to go all the way over to the page number tab and format page numbers, and now I actually want it to start as if it's a brand new section. So I'm going to have it start with normal Arabic numbers like that, and I'm going to start at 1 from the new section. So hit OK, and now you see that there's no number here. That's because that's still checked. Let me undo that. You see there's number 1 there, and number 2, number 3, number 4. The rest of my book reads like it started at page 1 there. What I can do before I do the next part is actually update my table of contents. So let me just do another custom table, because I don't want it to do anything too weird. So let me show you what the numbers are right now and zoom in. You see there's a 7, 13, 19. Yes, I want it right aligned. Hit OK. Yes, and there you go. You see now it says 2, 8, 14. The numbers changed to match what was on the new section numbers, and that's what I wanted. I want someone, when they open up my book and they're turning to chapter 1, to turn to page 2, and that's just gonna make it look really nice. I'm gonna go ahead and fix my table of contents real quick. Again, I wanted to make sure I showed you every step so you didn't like assume or think I'm jumping around. Okay, Go to home, and yeah, so that looks good. So the numbers start at 1 in the actual content of the book. And now what I want to focus on is changing everything, including the table contents and before, to Roman numerals. So I'm going to go ahead, turn the show hide back on, double click down here. We're going to go over, we're in the design tab for header footer tools. If you double click in the header or footer section anywhere in the text, it's usually going to pop this up automatically. Scroll over to the page number, left hand corner, hit format page numbers. And now what I want it to do is be lowercase Roman numerals, and you can see number format. I'm going to choose this like 5th option right here, the I, and so on. And that's all I want. So I'm going to hit OK. Let me close the header footer and turn off show hide so you can see what we did. Now, there's still no page number on the title page because that's what I wanted. I wanted that to stand apart. And now as we go through, you see these pre-pages, these front matter pages, have a different numbering system. So that way 2, 3, 4, and 5 don't show up anywhere in my table of contents. And now the actual book content has normal numbers going through the rest of the book. So if we scroll all the way to the bottom, you see the last page is 38. Even though this book is more than 38 pages, that's how the numbering system works. This is something I like to do. I think really professionally formatted nonfiction books use the same thing. They use some sort of Roman numeral set or something different than the main numbering set in the front matter. So that makes sense, and this is an easy way to do it. So you saw I used one section break to separate everything after the table of contents and everything before the table of contents, and that gave me 2 different numbering options. So the next step I want to show you how to do is to enter information in your header that shows one thing on the left hand side of the page and another thing on the right hand side of the page. So usually what that is the title of the book and the author name. There's also different ways to do it where you could do the individual chapter names, but I like to just keep it real simple. The title of my book on usually the left page, I think, and then the name of myself or the author of the book in the right hand page. I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're actually going to start in this section. Let me turn on the show hide so you know what I mean. So you see we had the section break after the table of contents. And so anything we do here now is going to be part of that new section. And I'm actually going to do a little extra step because I want my sections to look a certain way, and I don't want them to show up on blank pages normally, and I definitely don't want them to show up on the very first blank page. So what I'm going to do is add in another section break right here, next page, just so that everything I do next doesn't mess up that. And so you can see that number 1 is here and that number 1 is now here too. That's not what I want. So I'm going to unlink to previous. Oh no, that's not what I want. So I actually made my first little mistake there. I actually want the section to be on this blank page and everything before it. Real simple, I'm just going to throw in an additional page break to push it to this page and then delete this page break so that we have the first chapter starting on page 1 and everything before this blank page is a different section. Now I can start focusing on the headers, and we'll make sure we go through and update all the page numbers at the end because I have a feeling we might have to do a few little edits along the way. First thing I'm going to do is double click into the header and footer, and you see it brings up the tools again, and we're actually going to click all of these. So we want a different first page and we want different odd and even pages. I'm going to unclick link to previous because I want this section to be the start of everything we do for the rest of the book. Right in this area, I'm going to write title of my book. And on this page, I'm going to write my name. And then you can format these however you like. I usually make it a little smaller, so probably a size 9 or 10 font, and I center it, and I usually make it italics. And I'm going to do the same thing to my name and italics. And now you see, let me turn off the show hide and get out of it. Click that. So you can see that in this text, the first chapter page is nice and clean. And then as people turn through the book, they're going to see the title of my book and my author name and the headers of every single page. You can see that, of course, there's little errors. the page numbers disappeared and this text is showing up in the first section. So let's go ahead, double click into the header. These options are chosen for this page. I don't think all of them are chosen. There we go. So let's unlink to previous. And now that should take away my name from here. Let's delete it and it should not show up anymore. There we go. So that section has no headers or footers in the front matter of the book. And now everything afterwards should have the text that I want. Good. All right, now let's figure out what happened to the page numbers, why that doesn't work. All right, so I think we're just gonna insert page numbers again, the same one, and that should fix our issue. There we go. So when you're playing with the link to previous section and the different odd and even pages, it might throw things for a little whack, but don't worry, pretty much anything that goes away, we can bring it back. We can fix the issues. That's why I'm showing you this video. So you can see that we have the first page again is clean, and then we have the title on one side and my author name on the other. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go through and make the rest of the chapters look like that. I want my chapter pages to be clean. I don't want a header showing on that page. That's just a personal preference of mine, and it's an extra step for us to do in formatting, but it's pretty simple. So all we're gonna do, as long as it works correctly, is we're gonna turn the show hide again, and where we have the page break at the end of each chapter, we're gonna add in a section break. So we're gonna add in next page, and now you see that when things work the way they're supposed to, there is no header or footer on this front page. There's an extra space. I'm going to get rid of that. But on the rest of the chapter, you see the title of my book and David Ramos, my author name. The things from the previous section carried over into this one. Let me show you why. If I double click, you can see that the link to previous is checked. It's not checked in the chapter 1, which will probably be your introduction. It's not going to be checked there because we don't want those headers to show up in our front matter. But going forward, we do want to have that option checked from chapter 1 all the way to the end of the book because we want to carry on the same header and footer formatting. And now I'm going to go through and do it again. So at the last page break of the chapter, I'm going to throw in a new section break, next page. And there we go. It adds in exactly what I want. And again, you can see that we added additional blank pages to make sure our chapters all started on the right side of the book. And so I'm going to leave my custom header things on those pages because I want them to carry through. If you don't want them to carry through, all you would do is add in an additional section break before that page and after that page. And that would take away the header and even take away the page numbers if you wanted that too. Oh, you know what? The numbers are being a little weird, so I'm gonna fix that real quick too. So I go through and I click on the numbers part. I want these to work like normal, and I don't want them all to start at 1. I want them to continue from the previous section. So I'm gonna check that and hit OK. And now you see that those have worked. So now the numbers continue on just the way I want them to, nice and clean. And we're going to keep going through. So let's see, are the numbers weird? Yeah, the numbers are weird in chapter 3. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to double click down here. We're going to hit page number, format page number, and we're going to continue from section. So that way the numbers are counting up like we want them to do. And then let's see. We can get the rest of the chapters done. So again, the end of the chapter, we're going to insert section break. Take that away one more time. Insert next page section break. Get rid of that, and there we go. So now the first page of every chapter does not have my header, but it has everything else I want, and it looks like the page numbers have continued the way I wanted them to. And now one thing is I do leave my header, custom headers for the back matter. So you see like above this page and above the rest of the pages, you see the headers continuing. And that's usually, again, just a personal preference. You can use additional section breaks if you want to get rid of those, but I usually leave those on just to kind of carry on through the rest of the book. One thing you see a lot, maybe in bigger fiction works, not always in nonfiction, is that they actually put the chapter of the title in these headings when it's a longer chapter. And so that's an option you can do. Again, it's kind of the same steps. All you would do is add in a section break. You would unlink it to the previous section so that you could customize it however you wanted. And you could do the title on one page and the chapter title on another, or the chapter title and your author name, whatever combination you want. All you would have to do is make sure that you're editing each section individually. And by that, I mean each chapter section. So however or wherever you put your section breaks, anything after that is going to be different than anything before that, as long as you're making sure all your options are correct. So I hope that kind of makes sense. All right, one additional thing to kind of fix as we're going through this video is, if you saw, the page numbers actually disappeared from the first page of every chapter. Now, while this does present a very clean look, it's not super helpful when people are looking at the table of contents and they get a page number that tells them when a chapter starts, and then they're flipping through the book and can't actually find that physical page number. So this is a simple fix. We're going to double click into the footer, and we're going to go through and just reinsert the number the way we wanted it. And it should show up because it's linked to the previous section and everything kind of takes care of itself. Looks like it took care of it for our chapters. Usually you might need to go through and do it in each chapter, depending again on the different settings you might have checked. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. And in this one, I don't want it to show up on the title page, and I think I can get rid of it. So let's see. We see that we have the numbers on the first pages of our chapters, but we have it also on the title page, which isn't what we want. And so what we're going to do is click in here and make sure that it is not linked to previous sections. So we're going to jump back to this page, and this button was clicked, and so it was linked to our previous section, which was all our front matter. And now, since it's unlinked, if we delete it, then it should not affect anything else. There we go. So our page numbers look pretty good. And now that those are good, I'm going to go through and edit the table content one more time. Custom table, write a line, do that. Okay. And let me just make it not bold and fix the spacing. And there we go. Now we have page numbers that match the rest of the book. The first chapter starts at 1, which is the new section. We have our title and our author name on different pages throughout the text, not showing up on the first page of every chapter because we added a section break to the very last page of every chapter. And you can see that the book just has a really nice additional quality to it. We have our Roman numerals in the first few pages. Again, no number on the title page. And these are just a few of the additional things that you can do with section breaks to improve the quality of your book. Again, they are completely optional. You saw we did it in Word within a few minutes, depending on the size of your book. It might take a little bit longer, and if anything doesn't work the way I showed you, that's because of technology. And if you shoot me a question in the Facebook group, I'm sure we can figure it out. You know, there's always a workaround. Don't get too frustrated. I know I've done this, almost on 24 books now, and I have a pretty good idea of how to solve pretty much any issue I encounter. But oh my goodness, sometimes things just don't work the way you want them to. That's where finding YouTube tutorials or other forums online will also help. But again, that's why I made the Facebook group. So if you run into a particularly weird formatting issue, don't be afraid to shoot me a question in there, because I would love to answer it, and hopefully I have already encountered it and figured out how to fix it. So I hope you found this video helpful, and yeah, let's go get your book published. Thanks for watching.